The crowbar connected with bone, and Ethan Cross knew he'd just signed his own death warrant. Blood sprayed across his garage floor as the assassin crumpled, but the woman behind him, Valerie Hartley, though he didn't know her name yet, wasn't screaming. She was smiling. "You have no idea what you've just done," she whispered, designer dress torn and bloodied. "They won't stop until we're both dead." Outside, 3 more black SUVs were pulling up. This is my story of how a broken mechanic and a billionaire on the run brought down an empire in 7 days. Stay with me until the end and comment your city below. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain had been falling for 3 hours straight, turning the streets of industrial Detroit into rivers of oil-slicked water that reflected the dying sodium lights like broken mirrors. Ethan Cross stood in the doorway of his garage, watching the water cascade off the corrugated metal roof, creating a curtain between him and the rest of the world. It was 2:16 a.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of hour when honest people were asleep and the desperate ones made decisions that would haunt them forever. His hands were still trembling from the confrontation with Marcus, his landlord. 3 months behind on rent. 3 months of promises that meant nothing when the bills kept coming and the customers kept going to the chain shops with their bright lights and corporate guarantees. Ethan's garage Cross Automotive Repair had been his father's before him and his grandfather's before that. 3 generations of fixing what was broken, of making things whole again. Now it was about to become another casualty of a changing world that had no room for small men with big dreams. 30 days. Marcus had said, his thick fingers drumming against the eviction notice. "That's more than you deserve, but I knew your old man. 30 days, then you're out." Ethan pressed his forehead against the cold metal of the door frame, feeling the chill seep into his skin. His breath misted in the November air. 30 days to come up with $12,000. Might as well have been 30 days to find $1 million. The math was simple and cruel. He averaged maybe 6 cars a week now, down from 20 in the good times. At $60 profit per car on a good day, he'd need to fix 200 cars in a month. Impossible. The garage behind him was a monument to better times. Tool chests that had cost him 5 years of savings, now worth maybe 1/10 of what he'd paid. A hydraulic lift that groaned like an old man getting out of bed. Walls covered with calendars from parts suppliers. All of them stopped at different months from different years, as if time itself had given up on this place. In the corner, covered by a paint-stained tarp, sat the real heartbreak, a 1969 Camaro SS Cherry Red under all the dust. His project car. His someday car. The car he and Sarah were going to drive to California in before she decided that loving a man who came home with grease under his fingernails wasn't part of her life plan anymore. "You're sweet, Ethan," she'd said on that last night, her suitcase already in her sister's car. "But sweet doesn't pay the bills. Sweet doesn't buy a house. Sweet doesn't give me the life I want." That was 8 months ago. He'd thrown himself into work after that, as if fixing enough broken cars could somehow fix what was broken inside him. But the world had other plans. The economy tanked. The factory 2 blocks over closed down, taking with it half his customer base. The chain shop opened up on Madison Avenue with their fancy waiting room and their techs in clean uniforms who'd never really gotten their hands dirty, never really understood that fixing a car was about more than just replacing parts. It was about understanding the machine's soul, its history, the story written in every scratch and dent. Ethan was about to close the door to lock himself in with his failures for another sleepless night when he heard it. The sound was wrong for this time of night, wrong for this neighborhood. High heels on wet concrete, moving fast but unsteady. Then voices, male voices, low and threatening. "Just make it easy on yourself, Valerie. You know how this ends. Please, please, I have money. I can pay you. This isn't about money anymore. You should have thought of that before you started digging where you don't belong." Ethan's hand moved instinctively to the wrench in his back pocket, a Craftsman 916 worn smooth from his father's hands and his own. He peered around the corner of his garage into the alley that ran between his shop and the abandoned textile warehouse next door. What he saw made his blood turn to ice water. 3 men had cornered a woman against the brick wall. Even in the dim light, even with fear distorting her features, she was stunning in a way that seemed impossible in this part of town. Blonde hair that probably cost more to maintain than Ethan made in a month. A black dress that hugged her body like it had been painted on. Jewelry that caught what little light there was and threw it back in desperate sparkles. She was everything that didn't belong here, everything that Ethan had learned to recognize as another world. The world of people who had drivers, who had options, who had never eaten ramen for a week straight because it was that, or lose the electricity. The largest of the three men, bald, with the kind of muscles that came from a gym, not from work, grabbed her by the throat and pushed her against the wall. Mr. Ridgemont is very disappointed in you, Valerie. You were supposed to be smart. You were supposed to play along. I won't let you destroy everything my father built. The man's laugh was ugly. Your father was smart enough to die before he could see what we've turned his company into. You should have taken the buyout. You should have walked away. Now! He pulled something from his pocket. In the orange glow of the streetlight, Ethan saw the gleam of brass knuckles. Now you're going to have an accident. Tragic, really. Billionaire heiress drunk wandering into the wrong part of town. These things happen. The woman Valerie tried to run, but the second man caught her spinning her around. Her heel broke and she went down hard on the wet concrete. The sound she made wasn't quite a scream. It was something worse. The sound of someone who had just realized that money and power meant nothing when you were alone in an alley with men who had been paid to hurt you. Ethan didn't remember making the decision to move. One moment he was standing in his doorway, the next he was striding across the alley, the wrench solid and familiar in his hand. His grandfather had fought in Korea, had told him stories about the moment when thinking stopped and instinct took over. This was that moment. Hey! His voice cracked like a whip in the narrow space. Back off. Now. The three men turned to look at him, and Ethan saw their eyes catalog him in an instant. Work boots worn down at the heels, jeans with permanent grease stains, flannel shirt that had seen better decades. Not a threat. Not important. Not worth worrying about. The bald one actually smiled. Walk away, grease monkey. This doesn't concern you. I said back off. Ethan shifted his weight, falling into a stance his father had taught him behind this very garage when he was 12, and the Henderson kids wouldn't stop stealing his lunch money. I won't ask again. Or what? The third man, skinny with the twitchy energy of someone high on something, pulled out a knife. You gonna fix us to death? They laughed. All three of them laughed. And in that sound, Ethan heard every dismissal, every rejection, every moment when the world had looked at him and found him wanting. Sarah's voice. Sweet doesn't pay the bills. Marcus's voice. 30 days, the chain shop owner who'd tried to buy him out for pennies on the dollar. Face it, Cross. You're obsolete. The woman looked up at him from the ground, and her eyes green like sea glass, like something beautiful that had been broken and tumbled by the waves until it found a new form, held a mixture of hope and resignation. She expected him to walk away. Everyone walked away. That was how the world worked. The bald man took a step toward Ethan. Last chance, hero. Walk away and forget you saw anything. Or we add you to tonight's cleanup. Ethan thought about his empty garage, about the eviction notice, about all the ways his life had become a series of retreats and defeats. He thought about his father, who died at this workbench, wrench in hand, trying to finish one last job. He thought about his grandfather, who'd come back from Korea with shrapnel in his leg, and built this garage with his bare hands because he believed in the simple truth that if something was broken, you fixed it. No, Ethan said quietly. The bald man's face twisted with annoyance. No. You heard me. Ethan stepped forward, putting himself between the men and the woman. The lady's leaving with me. You three are going to walk away. That's how this ends. The skinny one with the knife laughed high and manic. You're kidding, right? You know who we are. You know who sent us. Don't care. Ethan kept his eyes on the bald one, the leader. In every pack there was an alpha. Take him down, and sometimes the others scattered. All I know is you're in my alley threatening this woman, and that ends now. The bald man moved faster than Ethan expected, the brass knuckles whistling through the air toward his face. But Ethan had been dodging flying wrenches in this garage since he was 6 years old, when his father would test his reflexes by throwing tools for him to catch. He ducked under the swing, brought the wrench up in a tight arc, and felt the satisfying crack of metal meeting jaw. The bald man staggered back, blood streaming from his mouth. The skinny one lunged with the knife, but Ethan had been expecting that. He caught the man's wrist twisted hard and heard the knife clatter against the wet pavement. His knee came up into the man's solar plexus, dropping him like a sack of potatoes. The third man who'd been hanging back reached inside his jacket. Gun. Ethan's mind registered with a clarity that surprised him. But Valerie, even from the ground, even with a broken heel, and what looked like blood running down her face from a cut on her forehead, wasn't finished. She grabbed the dropped knife and drove it into the man's calf. He screamed, dropping to one knee, the gun spinning away into the darkness. The bald man, blood still running from his mouth, pulled out his phone. "You have no idea what you've done," he snarled at Ethan. "You're dead. Both of you are—" Ethan hit him again with the wrench, this time in the temple. The man dropped the phone, flying from his hand to land in a puddle. The skinny one was trying to crawl away. The one with the knife in his leg was whimpering, trying to pull it out. "Don't," Ethan said to him. "Leave it in or you'll bleed out." He turned to the woman who was trying to stand on her broken heel. "Can you walk?" She nodded, though he could see she was shaking. Yes, I think so." "Good." He helped her up, noticed how her hands were soft, except for the calluses on her fingers. "Computer work, maybe, or piano?" "We need to go. Now." "Where?" He looked at the three men, one unconscious, two injured, but conscious enough to remember faces. No going back now. He'd crossed a line chosen a side in a fight he didn't understand. "My garage," he said. "It's not much, but it's secure. Come on." He half-carried, half-guided her to the side door of his shop, fumbling with the keys while looking over his shoulder. The skinny one had made it to his feet, was limping away while pulling out his phone. They'd have maybe 10 minutes before reinforcements arrived. The garage was dark, except for the emergency light over the exit. Ethan guided Valerie to the office, a generous term for the corner he'd walled off with salvaged plywood, and decorated with invoices that might never be paid. There was a couch there, another salvation from the side of the road that he'd cleaned up and claimed. She collapsed onto it, and in the light of the desk lamp he clicked on. He got his first real look at her. She was younger than he'd first thought, maybe 30, 32. The dress that had looked painted on was actually torn in several places, revealing bruises that were turning purple. Her left eye was swelling shut. Blood had dried in her hair. But underneath the damage, she was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with money. High cheekbones, a strong jaw, eyes that even filled with tears held a kind of fierce intelligence. "Thank you," she whispered. "You didn't have to—" "Yes, I did." Ethan went to the filing cabinet where he kept the first aid kit, the good one his father had insisted on, with actual medical supplies, not just Band-Aids. Nobody deserves what they were about to do to you. "You don't understand. They'll come back, more of them. They won't stop." "Then we'll deal with that when it happens." He sat down across from her, opened the kit. "Right now, let's focus on stopping that bleeding. What's your name?" "Valerie." She winced as he dabbed at the cut on her forehead with antiseptic. "Valerie Hartley." The name hit him like a physical blow. Hartley, as in Hartley Industries, as in the company that owned half the commercial real estate in the city, as in the billionaire family whose patriarch had died 6 months ago in a helicopter crash, leaving everything to his only daughter. "You're—" He couldn't finish the sentence. "Richard Hartley's daughter. Yes." She tried to smile, winced as it pulled at a cut on her lip. "Though after tonight I might not be anything for much longer." "What happened?" "Why were they?" "It's complicated." She looked away. "No, that's not true. It's actually very simple. They want my company. I wouldn't sell, so they decided to take it anyway." "They can't just— Can't they?" She looked back at him, and he saw a despair there that he recognized, the look of someone watching everything they'd built crumble. "You don't know these people. You don't know what they're capable of. My father spent 40 years building Hartley Industries, 40 years of honest deals, of treating people fairly, of building something that mattered. 6 months. That's all it took them to corrupt it from the inside. And when I tried to stop them—" She gestured at herself at the bruises and cuts. "We should call the police," Ethan said. "No." The vehemence in her voice startled him. "No police. They own half the force. The other half wouldn't believe me anyway. Billionaire claiming conspiracy." They'd say I was having a breakdown, that my father's death had finally caught up with me. There are already rumors carefully planted, of course, about my mental state, about my drinking, about my erratic behavior. But you have lawyers. Had lawyers. Until they were all suddenly offered better positions elsewhere, or discovered conflicts of interest, or simply stopped returning my calls. She pulled her knees up to her chest, making herself smaller on the couch. I'm alone, Mr. Cross, Ethan Cross. Mr. Cross, Ethan. I'm alone and I'm scared and I have nowhere else to go. Ethan stood up, paced to the window. Through the grimy glass he could see the alley where he'd just changed his life forever. In 30 days he'd lose this place anyway. In 30 days he'd have nothing. But right now he had walls and a lock and a woman who needed help. You can stay here tonight, he heard himself say. It's not fancy, but it's safe. Those walls are reinforced steel. My grandfather was paranoid about break-ins. There's only 2 ways in and I'll be watching both. I can pay you. No. He turned back to her. No money. That makes this a transaction, and transactions can be traced. You're just a friend crashing on my couch, that's all. She studied him for a long moment. Why are you helping me? You don't know me. You could have been killed back there. Ethan thought about how to answer that. The truth was complicated and simple at the same time, just like her situation. The truth was that he'd been dying a slow death in this garage, watching his life shrink day by day, until there was nothing left but debt and regret. The truth was that for the first time in months, maybe years, he'd felt alive in that alley. The truth was that she looked at him and saw someone capable of helping, not just someone to dismiss or pity. My grandfather used to say that a man's worth wasn't measured in what he had, but in what he was willing to fight for, he said finally. I haven't had much worth fighting for lately. Maybe that changes tonight. She smiled, then a real smile despite the split lip and the bruising. You're either very brave or very stupid, Ethan Cross. Probably both. He grabbed a blanket from the closet, one that didn't have too many oil stains. Try to get some rest. We'll figure out next steps in the morning. Ethan, she called as he headed for the door. What if they come tonight? He picked up a tire iron from the workbench, tested its weight. Then they'll learn that I don't just fix cars. Sometimes I break things too. When they need breaking. He left her there curled under the blanket on a couch that had seen better decades, in an office that wouldn't exist in 30 days, in a garage that 3 generations of crossmen had called home. He pulled a stool up to the front door, positioned where he could see both entrances, and settled in to wait. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the streets were still rivers of reflected light. Somewhere out there, men were making phone calls, organizing, planning. They'd be coming. Maybe not tonight, but soon. And when they did, they'd expect to find a scared woman alone, or at worst protected by some nobody mechanic who didn't know his place. They were half right. He was nobody, a failed mechanic in a dying garage with 30 days left before he lost everything. But they were also half wrong, because he wasn't protecting Valerie Hartley anymore. He was protecting someone who'd looked at him and seen something worth asking for help. He was protecting the first person in months who'd made him feel like he had a purpose beyond trying to make rent. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You made a mistake tonight. Walk away now, and we forget you exist. Stay, and you'll wish we had. Ethan deleted the message without replying. He'd made his choice in that alley when he'd stepped between Valerie and those men. Every choice after that was just following through. He thought about his father dying at that workbench, still trying to finish one last job. His father had never walked away from anything in his life. Not from the garage when times got tough. Not from Ethan's mother when she got sick. Not from his responsibilities, even when they crushed him. I won't walk away either, Dad, Ethan whispered to the empty garage. From the office, he heard Valerie shifting on the couch, heard her suppress a sob. She was trying to be quiet, trying to be strong, but he recognized the sound of someone realizing their world had ended, that everything they'd known was gone. He'd made that sound himself the night Sarah left, the night his father died, the night Marcus had handed him the eviction notice. But here was the thing about endings that Ethan had learned working on cars. Sometimes what looked like an ending was really just a transformation. You could take a rusted heap that everyone had written off, strip it down to its frame, and rebuild it into something better. It took work. It took pain. It took faith that something beautiful was waiting underneath all the damage. A car engine growled somewhere in the distance, getting closer. Ethan tightened his grip on the tire iron, watching the street through the window. The car passed without slowing, just someone heading home from a late shift, but his heart was racing. This was insane. He was one man with a tire iron and a wrench sitting in a garage that barely had working heat, protecting a billionaire from what was apparently a corporate coup with murderous intent. David and Goliath had better odds. But then again, David won that fight. The night stretched on minutes, feeling like hours. Ethan's eyes burned from staring at the street, from jumping at every sound. Around 4 a.m., exhaustion started to win. His head drooped, jerked back up. He couldn't do this alone. The side door exploded inward. Ethan was moving before his conscious mind processed what was happening, the tire iron already swinging. It caught the first man through the door in the ribs, dropping him with a sound like a baseball bat hitting a side of beef. The second man was faster, ducking under Ethan's follow-up swing and driving a fist into his kidney. Pain exploded through Ethan's side, but he'd been hurt before. Bar fights in his 20s, accidents in the garage, the constant low-level pain of a body that had been used hard for 35 years. He knew how to push through pain. He brought his elbow back, caught the man in the nose, felt the satisfying crunch of cartilage. Blood sprayed across the concrete floor. The man staggered back, and Ethan followed up with the tire iron across his knee. Another crunch, another scream, another body on the ground. But there were more coming. He could hear them, see shadows moving beyond the doorway. Too many. "Valerie," he shouted. "Back door now." She burst from the office barefoot now, carrying her broken heels. She'd found his work jacket, somehow had it wrapped around her shoulders. Even terrified, even running for her life, she moved with a grace that seemed impossible. "This way." He grabbed her hand, pulled her toward the back exit that led to the alley where this had all started. But as they reached it, the door opened from the outside. The bald man from before stood there, his jaw swollen and purple from where Ethan had hit him, his eyes full of murder. Going somewhere. He had a gun this time. A proper one, not something pulled in panic, but held with the steady hand of someone who'd used it before and would use it again without losing sleep. "Back inside," he said. "Both of you. Mr. Ridgemont wants to have a conversation." They had no choice. Ethan kept himself between Valerie and the gun as they walked back into the garage. More men had arrived, 6 total now, all in dark clothes, all with the look of professional violence about them. One of them older than the others, with silver at his temples and an expensive suit that somehow remained pristine, stepped forward. "Ms. Hartley, you've caused quite a bit of trouble tonight." "Ridgemont." Valerie's voice was steady, but Ethan could feel her trembling where her hand still gripped his arm. "I should have known you'd come personally. You always did like to watch the dirty work." "Dirty work?" Ridgemont smiled, the kind of smile that belonged in boardrooms where million-dollar deals destroyed thousands of lives. "This is just business, Valerie. Your father understood that. It's a shame you don't." "My father would have—" "Your father is dead." Ridgemont's voice cut like a scalpel. "And his company is about to undergo a necessary transformation. You could have been part of it. Could have taken the very generous offer we made and lived a comfortable life somewhere far from here. But you had to be stubborn, had to be righteous, just like Richard. You killed him." "It wasn't a question." Ridgemont shrugged. "Helicopters are dangerous things. Mechanical failures happen, tragic really. But at least his was quick. Yours, I'm afraid, will need to be more elaborate. The story needs to be believable. Billionaire heiress unstable after her father's death gets involved with the wrong people in the wrong part of town. Drugs, probably. Maybe a love affair gone wrong with a down-on-his-luck mechanic who saw an opportunity." His eyes shifted to Ethan. "That's where you come in, Mr. Cross. Yes, we know who you are. We know about your debts, your impending eviction, your ex-girlfriend who'll swear you've been unstable since she left. You're perfect for this role." You won't have to do anything except die badly." Ridgemont nodded to his men. "Kill him first. Make it messy. She needs to see what defiance costs." The bald man raised his gun, and Ethan had a moment of perfect clarity. He was going to die in his father's garage, surrounded by the tools of a trade that the world no longer needed, protecting a woman he'd known for less than 2 hours. It wasn't the worst way to go. It was better than the slow death he'd been dying, better than watching everything crumble while he stood by, helpless. But Valerie had other plans. She moved faster than Ethan would have thought possible, grabbing a wrench from the workbench and throwing it with surprising accuracy. It hit the bald man's hand, sending the gun spinning away. In the moment of confusion that followed, she dove for the floor, rolled, came up with the gun in her hands. "Nobody move," she said. And there was something in her voice that made everyone, including Ridgemont, freeze. This wasn't the voice of a frightened heiress. This was something else, something harder. "You don't know how to use that," Ridgemont said, but there was uncertainty now in his voice. "My father was paranoid after the first hostile takeover attempt 5 years ago," Valerie said, keeping the gun steady. "He made sure I knew how to protect myself. I've been training twice a week for 5 years. I'm a better shot than any of your thugs. There are 6 of us and 1 of you. 1 gun, 6 bullets. I might not get all of you, but I'll definitely get you, Ridgemont. You're the biggest target, and you're standing perfectly still." She smiled, and it was sharp as broken glass. "Want to see who's faster?" The moment stretched like a wire about to snap. Ethan could hear his own heartbeat, could hear Valerie's controlled breathing, could hear one of the injured men on the floor whimpering. Someone was going to move. Someone always moved. And when they did, the front door exploded inward for the second time that night. But this time it wasn't thugs in dark clothes. It was something Ethan hadn't expected, something that changed every calculation in the room. It was the police. Real police, not the owned ones Valerie had worried about, but a SWAT team in full tactical gear, weapons drawn and shouting commands. "Everyone on the ground, now, weapons down on the ground." The garage erupted into chaos. Ridgemont's men went for their weapons. The SWAT team opened fire with less lethal rounds, rubber bullets and tasers. Men screamed, fell, tried to run. Ridgemont himself stood frozen, his careful plan crumbling around him. Ethan grabbed Valerie, pulled her behind the tool chest as the garage became a war zone. She still had the gun, but she wasn't firing, wasn't adding to the chaos. She was smart enough to know that in a situation like this, anyone with a weapon was a target. It was over in less than 30 seconds. Ridgemont's men were on the ground, zip-tied and groaning. Ridgemont himself was in handcuffs, his expensive suit finally disheveled, his carefully styled hair mussed. He looked older, suddenly. Smaller, just a man who'd played a game and lost. A detective walked in behind the SWAT team badge out, looking tired but satisfied. "Valerie Hartley." She stood slowly, leaving the gun on the floor. "Yes." "Detective Morrison, we received your uploaded files an hour ago. Financial records, communication logs, video evidence of conspiracy and attempted murder. It was enough for emergency warrants. Mr. Ridgemont and his associates are under arrest for conspiracy, attempted murder, fraud, and about a dozen other charges that the DA is still sorting through." "Uploaded files?" Ethan asked, confused. Valerie turned to him with a smile that was part embarrassment, part pride. "I wasn't entirely honest with you. I've been gathering evidence for months. Everything is backed up to a cloud server with a dead man's switch. If I don't check in every 12 hours, it automatically uploads to the FBI, the SEC, the Detroit Police, and about 6 major news outlets. I missed tonight's check-in while I was running for my life." "You played me," Ridgemont snarled as they dragged him past. "You let me think you were helpless." "I learned from my father," Valerie said. "He taught me that sometimes the best strength is letting your enemies think you're weak. You were so busy trying to kill me that you never wondered why I was in this neighborhood in the first place." She turned to Ethan. "I was coming to hire you." "Hire me?" Nothing made sense anymore. "I'd heard about you, the last honest mechanic in Detroit, they call you. The one who tells people the truth about their cars, even when a lie would make you more money. I needed someone I could trust to help me move some physical evidence hard drives that couldn't be uploaded, original documents that needed to be preserved. Someone who knew the city, who could help me disappear if I needed to. But the attack was real. They found me before I could get to you. Everything after that, including you saving my life, was real." She touched his face gently, her fingers soft against his stubbled cheek. "You're a good man, Ethan Cross. A hero, even if you don't see it." The garage was emptying now, Ridgemont's men being loaded into police vans, crime scene tape being strung. Detective Morrison approached them. "We'll need statements from both of you. And Ms. Hartley, you'll need protection until we can round up all of Ridgemont's associates. I can arrange private security. No. Ethan surprised himself by speaking. She stays here, or I go with her. Either way, I'm not letting her out of my sight until this is over. Morrison looked between them, saw something there that made him nod. All right. We'll post units outside. Don't go anywhere without letting us know. As the last of the police left, Ethan and Valerie stood alone in the garage, surrounded by the debris of the fight, scattered tools, blood on the concrete, the door hanging off its hinges. The sunrise was beginning to filter through the windows, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. Your garage, Valerie said quietly. I'm so sorry. I'll pay for all the damage, of course. It's just stuff, Ethan said, though the destruction of his father's place hurt more than he wanted to admit. Besides, in 30 days, it won't be mine anyway. What do you mean? He told her about the eviction, about the debts, about the slow death of American craftsmanship in the face of corporate efficiency. She listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. What if it didn't have to end? She asked finally. What if someone invested in this place? Updated the equipment, marketed to the classic car community, turned it into something special. That would take more money than... I have money, Ethan. More than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. And after tonight, after what you did for me, I want to invest in something real, something that matters, something that saves things instead of destroying them. You don't owe me anything. This isn't about owing. She stepped closer to him, close enough that he could smell her perfume mixed with the oil and metal of the garage. This is about believing in something. You believed in me enough to risk your life for a stranger. Let me believe in you. Ethan looked around the garage, seeing it not as it was, but as it could be. New equipment, restored classics in the bays. His grandfather's name still on the sign, but with new life breathed into it. It was a dream he'd given up on, but here it was being offered by a woman who'd literally fallen into his life. Partners, he asked. Partners. She agreed and held out her hand. He shook it, noting the contrast, her soft skin against his calloused palm, her expensive rings against his grease-stained fingers. They were from different worlds, but tonight had shown that sometimes different worlds could collide and create something new, something better. So, he said, still holding her hand, what now? She smiled, and despite the bruises, despite the exhaustion, despite everything they'd been through, it was beautiful. Now we rebuild. Your garage, my company, maybe a few other broken things along the way. I fix broken things, Ethan said, echoing his words from earlier. And I apparently break the things that need breaking, Valerie replied. Seems like a good partnership to me. The sun was fully up now, streaming through the windows, chasing away the shadows of the night. Outside life was returning to the streets. People heading to work, living their lives, unaware that in this small garage 2 people had fought off the darkness and won. Ethan went to the coffee maker in the corner, one of the few things that hadn't been destroyed in the fight, and started a pot. It was old and temperamental, requiring just the right touch to work properly, but he'd been coaxing life out of it for years. Coffee, he asked. God, yes. Valerie collapsed onto the couch in his office. Their office now, he supposed. Although I should warn you, I'm used to artisanal Brazilian beans hand-ground by monks, or something equally ridiculous. Well, you're in luck. This is genuine Detroit industrial sludge. It'll put hair on your chest and strip paint off a car. She laughed, really laughed, and the sound filled the garage like music. Perfect. After tonight, I think I need some hair on my chest. As the coffee perked, Ethan found himself thinking about the strange turns life could take. 12 hours ago, he'd been ready to give up to accept that his story was ending. Now he had a partner, a purpose, and the promise of something he'd thought was lost forever, a future. His phone buzzed. Another unknown number, but this time the message was different. Mr. Cross. This is Richardson from Channel 7 News. We've received some incredible footage of tonight's events. Would you be available for an interview? He showed it to Valerie. She groaned. It begins. By noon, this will be everywhere. The media loves a good billionaire scandal. What should I tell them? The truth. She walked to him, took his hands in hers. That a good man stood up to evil. That sometimes the underdog wins. that there are still people in this world who do the right thing simply because it's right. That's not the whole truth. No. She raised an eyebrow. The whole truth is that I was planning to give up. The whole truth is that you saved me as much as I saved you. The whole truth is... He paused, searching for the words. The whole truth is that sometimes two broken people can make each other whole. She kissed him, then gentle, despite her split lip, careful, despite the urgency of it. It was a kiss that promised more than passion. It promised partnership, understanding a future neither of them could have imagined alone. When they broke apart, the coffee was ready, filling the garage with its bitter, familiar scent. Outside, they could hear sirens in the distance, reporters probably already gathering, the machinery of justice and media beginning to turn. But inside the garage in this moment, there was peace. There was hope. There was the beginning of something that would grow beyond what either of them could imagine: a business, yes, but more than that. A partnership that would transform not just a failing garage and a corrupted company, but two lives that had been heading toward different kinds of endings. Ethan poured 2 cups of coffee in mismatched mugs, one advertising a parts supplier that had gone out of business 5 years ago, the other a gift from Sarah that he'd never been able to throw away. He handed one to Valerie, who took it with hands that were finally steady. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her mug. "To fixing what's broken," he replied, touching his mug to hers. They drank the terrible coffee as the morning sun painted their destroyed garage in shades of gold, and for the first time in longer than either could remember, the future looked bright. The coffee had gone cold in their mugs, but neither Ethan nor Valerie noticed. They sat in the wreckage of the garage as Detective Morrison returned with a thick folder of documents, his face grave in a way that made Ethan's stomach tighten. The morning sun that had seemed so promising an hour ago now felt harsh, exposing every crack in the walls, every bloodstain on the concrete. "We have a problem," Morrison said without preamble. "Ridgemont made bail." Valerie's hand found Ethan's gripping tight enough to hurt. "How is that possible? You have the evidence." "We have evidence of conspiracy and assault. What we don't have is enough to hold him on the bigger charges. His lawyers are already spinning this as a business dispute that got out of hand. They're claiming you attacked first, that his men were just defending themselves." Morrison's jaw tightened. "And there's something else. 3 of the judges who could hear this case have suddenly recused themselves. The 4th just happened to vacation in Ridgemont's Aspen cabin last Christmas." "He's going to walk," Valerie said, her voice hollow. "All of this for nothing." "Not nothing," Morrison corrected. "We've disrupted his operation. Some of his people are talking. But you're right about one thing: he's not going to prison anytime soon, which means you're still in danger." Ethan stood pacing to the broken door, staring out at the street where news vans were already gathering. "So what do we do?" "You disappear," Morrison said simply. "Both of you. At least until we can build a stronger case." "I can't disappear," Valerie protested. "I have a company to run. If I'm not there, Ridgemont's people will tear it apart from the inside." "They're already doing that." Morrison pulled out his phone, showed them a news feed. The headline made Ethan's blood run cold. "Hartley Industries Board calls emergency meeting to discuss CEO's mental fitness." Valerie took the phone with trembling hands, scrolling through the article. "They're using the footage from last night. They're saying I had a breakdown, that I hired criminals to attack board members." She looked up, tears streaming down her bruised face. "They're making me look insane." "That's their play," Morrison confirmed. "Discredit you declared mentally incompetent, take control of the company while you're locked in some private facility for your own good? It's been done before." "My father built that company," Valerie whispered, 40 years of his life." "And they'll destroy it in 40 days if we don't do something," Ethan said. He'd been quiet, thinking, his mind working the problem like he'd work on a stubborn engine, looking for the hidden connection, the thing everyone else missed. "You said you have evidence. Financial records, communications. What exactly do you have?" Valerie wiped her eyes, forced herself to focus. "Everything. 2 years of emails discussing illegal takeover tactics. Recordings of Ridgemont bragging about bribing officials. Financial transfers to offshore accounts. The problem is it's all scattered. Some of it's encrypted. Some of it needs context to understand. I was gathering it all, but I needed more time." "How much more time?" "A week, maybe 2. I have a forensic accountant who was helping me, but she went into hiding after they threatened her daughter. Ethan turned to Morrison. Can you give us 2 weeks? I can't guarantee your safety for 2 hours, much less 2 weeks. Ridgemont has resources we can't match. Private security information networks, judges in his pocket. Then we don't play by his rules, Ethan said. He was thinking about his grandfather again, about the stories from Korea. When you're outgunned, you don't fight fair, you fight smart. You fight dirty if you have to. What are you suggesting? Morrison asked. I'm suggesting we stop playing defense. Ethan looked at Valerie. You know their system. You know where the bodies are buried. Instead of waiting for them to come after us, we go after them. We burn their whole operation to the ground. Morrison started to object, then stopped. Actually, that's not the worst idea I've heard. But you'd need resources, safe houses, technical support. I have money, Valerie said, steel returning to her voice. Accounts they don't know about that my father set up in case something like this happened. I have contacts in the tech world who owe me favors, and now I have something else, a partner who apparently doesn't know when to quit. She stood, and despite the bruises, despite everything, Ethan saw the billionaire CEO. She really was brilliant, determined, dangerous when cornered. Detective Morrison, I need you to do something for me, she said. I need you to arrest me. What? Both men said it simultaneously. Arrest me, very publicly. Mental health evaluation, danger to myself and others. Whatever you need to say. Put me in protective custody, but make it look like I've been institutionalized. That gives us cover and makes Ridgemont think he's won. And then Ethan and I disappear. We set up somewhere they won't think to look. We compile everything, build an airtight case, and when we're ready, we don't just take down Ridgemont, we take down his entire network. Morrison considered this. I could sell that to my captain, but once we do this, there's no going back. You'll be completely on your own until you're ready to surface. We won't be alone, Ethan said. I know people, good people, who've been stepped on by men like Ridgemont their whole lives. Mechanics, truckers, construction workers. People who know this city better than any corporate security team. People who'd love a chance to punch up for once. You're talking about building an army, Morrison said. I'm talking about a revolution, Ethan corrected. These corporate vampires have been bleeding this city dry for years. Maybe it's time someone reminded them that Detroit doesn't go down without a fight. Morrison stood, gathered his papers. I'll need 2 hours to set this up. The arrest needs to look real, which means I need officers who aren't in on it. Valerie, you'll need to put on a show. Make them believe you've snapped. That won't be hard, she said bitterly. I'm halfway there already. After Morrison left, they had 2 hours to prepare. Ethan went to his apartment above the garage, 3 rooms that hadn't been updated since the 1970s, but clean and functional. He packed quickly, clothes, tools, his father's journal. The emergency cash he'd been saving for the truly desperate moment that had apparently arrived. When he came back down, Valerie was on his computer, fingers flying across the keyboard with the speed of someone who'd learned to code before she learned to drive. What are you doing? Transferring money to untraceable accounts, setting up safe houses, sending messages to people I trust. She paused, looked up at him. Are you sure about this? You could walk away. Once Morrison arrests me, tells everyone I'm crazy, you could just say you were another victim. Go back to your life. What life? Ethan sat beside her, close enough to feel the warmth of her body. The garage is gone in 30 days. Sarah's gone. Everything I built is falling apart. But this fighting beside you, this feels like something worth doing. Even if we die trying. Especially then. He touched her face gently, careful of the bruises. My dad died at that workbench out there, still trying to fix one last car. He died doing what he believed in. If I'm going out, I want it to be fighting for something that matters. She kissed him again, harder this time, desperate and hungry. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. We're going to win, she said. I need you to believe that. I believe in you, he replied. That's enough for now. The sound of sirens grew closer. Multiple vehicles. Morrison had mobilized a show of force. Valerie stood, straightened her torn dress. How do I look? Like a billionaire having a mental breakdown. Perfect. She grabbed a wrench from the workbench. When they come in, I need you to look scared. Act like I've been holding you hostage. Sell it. I don't have to act. You're terrifying when you want to be. She smiled the last real smile he'd see from her for a while. Remember that when this is all over. The police burst in a carefully choreographed chaos. Valerie screamed through the wrench at them, ranted about conspiracies and murder plots that sounded insane to anyone who didn't know the truth. They tackled her cuffed, dragged her out, while she fought and cursed and cried. Ethan played his part, the shocked mechanic who'd gotten caught up in a rich woman's delusions. He answered their questions with just enough truth to be believable, just enough confusion to seem authentic. Yes, she'd shown up injured. Yes, she'd talked about people trying to kill her. No, he didn't know what to believe. The news crews caught it all, the perfect footage for the evening news. Billionaire heiress breakdown Valerie Hartley arrested after violent incident. Morrison stayed behind after the others left, helped Ethan board up the broken door. She's secure, he said quietly. Private room at the psychiatric ward, but it's actually our protective custody suite. She'll have access to a computer phone, everything she needs. When do we move in tonight? I'll have an unmarked car pick you up at midnight. Pack light assume you won't be back for a while. Detective, Ethan called as Morrison headed for his car. Why are you doing this, really? Morrison paused, turned back. My father worked at the Hartley Industries factory for 30 years. When Richard Hartley ran things, it was a good job. Fair wages, good benefits, treated people with respect. Then these corporate raiders started circling and suddenly the pension fund was gone. Benefits cut, wages slashed. My dad died 2 years into his retirement, broke and bitter. So yeah, I've got skin in this game. After he left, Ethan sat in his empty garage, surrounded by the ghosts of 3 generations of honest work. The news played on his old radio, already spinning the story. Valerie Hartley was unstable. The board was taking emergency action to protect the company. Ridgemont appeared in a brief interview expressing his deep concern for his colleagues' mental health. Lying bastard, Ethan muttered. His phone rang. Unknown number. Don't hang up, a woman's voice said quickly. My name is Diana Chen. I was Valerie's forensic accountant. I heard about what happened. I want to help. How do I know you're real? Valerie told you about her dead man's switch, right? The upload system, I built that. Check your email. I just sent you proof. Ethan checked. There was a message with attachments code he didn't understand but recognized as legitimate, and a photo of Diana with Valerie at what looked like a company party. Okay, you're real. What do you want? To finish what we started. I have terabytes of data, hidden evidence that could bury Ridgemont and his whole network. But I need protection, and I need someone who can get to the physical drives I've hidden around the city. How did you know to call me? Valerie texted me before they arrested her. Said you were the only person she trusted. Said you'd know what to do with this. Diana paused. She also said to tell you that broken things can be rebuilt stronger than they were before. Ethan smiled despite everything. That sounded like Valerie. Where are you? He asked. Motel off 8 Mile. But I can't stay here. They're looking for me. Stay put. Lock the door. Don't answer for anyone except me. I'll be there in an hour. He hung up, grabbed his tools and his father's old army surplus bag. If they were going to war, they'd need soldiers. Diana was the first recruit, but she wouldn't be the last. His next call was to Tommy Russo, his oldest friend, a former Marine who ran a small security company that mostly did nightclub doors and repo protection. Tommy, it's Ethan. I need a favor. Jesus, Ethan, you're all over the news. That crazy billionaire really holds you hostage. She's not crazy, and I need your help. The real deal, not the media spin. There was a pause. This about what happened to your garage. This is about something bigger. About fighting back against the people who've been crushing guys like us our whole lives. I need soldiers, Tommy, people who can handle themselves and keep their mouths shut. Another pause longer. How many? As many as you can get. And the pay. Better than you've ever seen, cash untraceable. Tonight, midnight, I'll text you the location. Ethan, is this legal? It's justice. That's all that matters. Tommy laughed dark and anticipatory. Haven't heard you talk like this since high school when we took on the Brennan brothers for picking on that kid. All right, I'm in. I'll bring my best guys. The next call was to Marcus, his landlord. This one would be harder.
Ethan, Christ boy, what have you gotten yourself into? Marcus, I need the garage for 2 more weeks. You're 30 days from eviction and mixed up with some crazy... She's not crazy and I can pay. Full rent for 6 months cash tonight. Silence. Marcus might be a hard ass, but he was also a businessman. Cash. Untraceable bills, but I need something else. I need you to tell anyone who asks that I packed up and left town, scared running whatever sounds believable. Ethan, what are you involved in? Something that might save this city, or at least punch the people destroying it right in the mouth. You in? Marcus sighed. Your father was a good man. You're a good man. Against my better judgment. Yeah, I'm in. But if this goes bad... If this goes bad, I'll probably be dead so you can say whatever you want about me. He made 3 more calls. Luis, who ran a food truck and knew every corner of the city.
Sarah's brother Mike, who worked IT for the city and had access to traffic cameras and municipal databases. Finally, Father O'Brien from St. Catherine's, who ran a shelter and had connections throughout the homeless community, the invisible eyes and ears of Detroit. Each conversation was a variation on the same theme. The system is rigged. The rich are eating the poor. But now we have a chance to fight back. Are you in? Every single one said yes. By the time he reached Diana's motel, Ethan had the beginnings of an army. Not soldiers in the traditional sense, but something better, people who knew the city, who'd been stepped on their whole lives, who were hungry for a chance to matter. Diana answered the door with a baseball bat in her hands, only relaxing when she saw his face. She was younger than her voice had suggested, maybe late 20s, Asian features sharp with intelligence and exhaustion. Thank God, she said, dropping the bat. I've been jumping at every sound. But pack up, we're leaving. Where are we going? Somewhere they'd never think to look for a billionaire and her crew. We're going underground. Literally. As Diana gathered her equipment, 3 laptops, a dozen external drives, and enough cables to wire a small building, Ethan explained the plan. The abandoned subway tunnels beneath Detroit forgotten when the city's expansion plans died with the auto industry. Tommy's cousin worked municipal maintenance and knew every entrance, every tunnel that was still stable. You want to hide in abandoned subway tunnels? Diana asked skeptically. I want to build a command center where Ridgemont's money and connections mean nothing, where we control the environment, where we can work without looking over our shoulders. That's either brilliant or insane. Probably both. Valerie's rubbing off on me. They loaded Diana's equipment into Ethan's truck, the same beat-up Ford that had hauled car parts for 15 years. As they drove through Detroit's dark streets, Diana opened one of her laptops, showing him spreadsheets that made his head spin. This is what I've found so far, she said. Ridgemont's network is bigger than just Hartley Industries. He's got fingers in city construction contracts, police pensions, judicial campaign funds. He's not just a corporate raider, he's a cancer that's metastasized through the entire city. How much is he worth? On paper, maybe $300 million, but the real money is hidden. Offshore accounts, shell companies, cryptocurrency. I've tracked at least $2 billion in assets that officially don't exist. And you can prove this, given time and resources. Yes, but it's not just about proving it. It's about presenting it in a way that can't be ignored or suppressed. We need something dramatic, something that forces action. They met Tommy and his team at an abandoned warehouse on the east side. 6 men, all veterans, all with the same hard eyes and steady hands that spoke of violence held in check by discipline. These are the best I've got, Tommy said. Martinez Williams. Chen, no relation to you, Diana, Johnson, Pike, and Reeves. They know the deal. They're ready. We're really doing this, Martinez asked. He was older than the others, gray at the temples, moved with the careful precision of someone who'd learned that rushing got you killed. Taking on the Billionaire Boys Club. We're doing more than that, Ethan said. We're going to expose every dirty deal, every bribe, every crime they thought they'd buried. We're going to make it impossible for them to operate in the shadows anymore. And if they come for us? Williams asked. Young, eager, the kind of soldier who was looking for a war to fight. Then we remind them that Detroit wasn't built by billionaires in boardrooms, Ethan replied. It was built by people like us, and we're taking it back. They moved through the city like ghosts using service entrances and maintenance tunnels. Tommy's cousin, a rail-thin man named Eddie, who knew every pipe and wire beneath Detroit, led them to an entrance hidden behind a false wall in a utility station. The tunnel beyond was a marvel of abandoned ambition, wide enough for trains that never ran lined with tiles that had once been white but were now stained with decades of neglect. But the bones were good, the structure was sound, and about a mile in they found what Eddie had promised, a maintenance station with electricity pirated from the grid above running water from pipes that everyone had forgotten existed, even rudimentary ventilation. "Home sweet home," Eddie said, grinning. "Been using this place to store stuff for years. City doesn't even know it exists anymore." They spent the rest of the night transforming the space. Diana set up her computers, hardwiring them into encrypted connections that bounced through so many proxies even the NSA would get dizzy trying to trace them. Tommy's team established security protocols, watch schedules, escape routes. Luis arrived with his food truck, having cleaned out a restaurant supply store, with Valerie's cash setting up a kitchen that could feed their small army for weeks. Mike showed up just after dawn carrying boxes of equipment that had fallen off the truck from the city's IT department. "Set up a back door into the traffic camera system," he said. "We'll see them coming from blocks away." Father O'Brien was the last to arrive, and he didn't come alone. 3 people followed him, a young woman with the hardened look of someone who'd lived on the streets, an older black man with intelligent eyes, and a teenager who couldn't have been more than 16. "These are my most trusted," the father said. "Maria Jackson and Tyler. They know this city better than any map. They can go places, see things that no one else can." "A priest helping us break the law?" Diana asked. "I'm helping you serve justice," Father O'Brien corrected. "There's a difference between legal and moral. What Ridgemont and his kind do might be legal, but it's evil. What you're doing might not be legal, but it's righteous." By the time Ethan's phone buzzed with Morrison's signal, they had transformed the abandoned station into something remarkable, a hidden fortress in the belly of the city, staffed by people who'd been invisible to men like Ridgemont their whole lives. Morrison arrived with Valerie just after sunset, using a route Eddie had mapped that avoided every camera and checkpoint. When Valerie stepped into the station, still wearing a hospital gown under a stolen coat, her face lit up with something Ethan hadn't seen before, hope mixed with savage satisfaction. "This is incredible," she said, taking in the computers, the supplies, the people. "This is really happening." "This is just the beginning," Ethan told her. "Diana's been showing me what she found. Ridgemont's dirty, but he's not alone. There's a whole network of them feeding off the city like vampires." "Then we'll drive a stake through all their hearts," Valerie said. She moved to Diana's workstation, the 2 women immediately falling into rapid technical discussion that left everyone else behind. "You did this," Morrison said quietly to Ethan. "In less than 24 hours, you built this." "I just made some phone calls. These people, they've been waiting for a chance like this their whole lives. A chance to fight back to matter. You know they'll come for you, all of you. When they realize what you're doing, they'll bring everything they have." "Good," Ethan said, thinking about his father dying at his workbench, thinking about 3 generations of honest work about to be erased. "Let them come. They'll learn what happens when you back Detroit into a corner." Over the next 3 days, their underground army grew. Word spread through whispers and careful contacts. A janitor from Hartley Industries who'd been copying files for years, waiting for someone to care. A secretary from Ridgemont's own office who'd been recording conversations. A cop who'd been pressured to look the other way one too many times. They didn't all come to the tunnels that would have been too dangerous, but they became part of the network feeding information through encrypted channels Diana had set up. Every crime Ridgemont and his associates had thought hidden began flowing into their underground command center. Valerie barely slept, driven by a fury that burned cold and precise. She and Diana pieced together financial crimes that went back decades, connecting dots that painted a picture of systematic corruption that had hollowed out Detroit from the inside. "Look at this," Diana said on the 4th night, pulling up a complex chart on her screens. "They're not just stealing money, they're deliberately destroying companies, buying them cheap, loading them with debt, then selling off the pieces. They've done it 43 times in the last 10 years. "Vampire capitalism," Father O'Brien said from where he was helping Luis prepare dinner, "sucking the life out of everything they touch." How much evidence do we need? Tommy asked. His team had just returned from a mission to retrieve hidden drives from Diana's safe houses around the city. We have enough to convict, Valerie said. But conviction isn't enough. They'll get minimum security, maybe house arrest. Their lawyers will appeal for years. No, we need to destroy them completely. Financially, socially, politically, we need to make them toxic to everyone who's ever done business with them. That's going to take something big, Morrison said. He'd been splitting time between the tunnels and his precinct, maintaining his cover while feeding them information. Something they can't spin or suppress. I have an idea, Ethan said. Everyone turned to look at him. He'd been quiet watching Learning, but something had been forming in his mind. Ridgemont's having his annual charity gala next week. Every corrupt judge, politician, and business leader in the city will be there. Black tie media coverage, the works. So, Williams asked, so we crash it. Not physically, digitally. Diana, could you hack their presentation system? Child's play, she said. Everything's networked now. Give me 10 minutes and I could make their screens show anything. Then we give them a show. Live broadcast of every crime, every payoff, every backroom deal. Make it impossible to ignore. Valerie stood up slowly, a smile spreading across her face that was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. We could do more than that. I still have my invitation. They haven't formally removed me as CEO yet. That's what the board meeting after the gala is for. You want to walk in there? Morrison asked. That's suicide. No, Valerie said. That's justice. I walk in the front door while Diana hacks their systems. When they try to have me removed, that's when we strike. Every screen, every phone, every device in that ballroom becomes a window into their corruption. They'll arrest you, Morrison warned. On what charge? I'm the CEO attending a company function. My mental health evaluation. The real one you filed, not the fake one, they're claiming says I'm completely sane. If they try to stop me, they'll have to do it in front of every camera in Detroit. I'm going with you, Ethan said immediately. You don't have to. Partners, remember. Besides, you'll need someone to watch your back when things go sideways. When, not if, she asked with a slight smile. Have you met you things always go sideways around you? It's part of your charm. The room erupted into planning. Tommy and his team would provide security from the shadows. Diana would infiltrate their systems. Mike would ensure city cameras mysteriously malfunctioned at key moments. Father O'Brien would mobilize his network to be witnesses, people with phones ready to record everything. We're going to need more than evidence, Jackson, the older man from Father O'Brien's group, said. Ridgemont's got a PR machine. They'll spin this as a desperate attack by an unstable woman. Then we give them something they can't spin, Maria suggested. She'd been quiet until now, but there was sharp intelligence in her eyes. We need victims to come forward, people whose lives were destroyed by these men, put faces to the crimes. I can do that, Father O'Brien said. Half my shelter is filled with people who lost everything to Ridgemont's schemes. Former factory workers, small business owners, he crushed families destroyed by his gentrification projects. We'll need protection for them, Morrison said. Once they go public, they'll be targets. My team can handle that, Tommy said. We'll keep them safe. As the planning continued deep into the night, Ethan found himself watching Valerie. She'd transformed from the terrified woman in the alley to something else, a force of nature brilliant and determined and absolutely unwilling to surrender. The bruises had faded to yellow and green, but they only seemed to emphasize her strength. She caught him looking and moved to stand beside him, their shoulders touching. Scared, she asked quietly. Terrified, he admitted. But also alive. For the first time in years, I feel alive. Even though we might not survive this, we'll survive. We have to. Someone needs to fix what they broke. She took his hand, interlaced their fingers. Her skin was soft, except for those calluses that spoke of late nights and hard work. When this is over, she said, I want to rebuild your garage. Make it something special. A place where people fix things that matter. When this is over, Ethan replied, I want to help you rebuild your father's company. Make it what he always wanted it to be. You really think we can do it? Take down Ridgemont and his whole network. Ethan thought about everyone gathered in this abandoned tunnel. Soldiers and priests, hackers and homeless mechanics, and billionaires, all united by a shared understanding that the system was broken and needed fixing. "Yeah," he said, squeezing her hand. "I think we can do anything." Above them, Detroit slept unaware that beneath its streets, a revolution was being planned. In 3 days, Ridgemont would host his gala, expecting to celebrate his victory over Valerie Hartley and his complete takeover of her father's empire. He had no idea what was coming. The black sedan appeared across from the garage at 3:47 a.m., 3 days before the gala. Ethan spotted it first on the camera feeds Mike had wired into their underground command center, the car's engine running, exhaust visible in the cold Detroit morning. Nobody sat in a running car at that hour, unless they were watching something or someone. "We've got company," he announced, and the tunnel station transformed instantly from planning session to battle readiness. Tommy's men checked weapons, Diana began backing up data to remote servers, and Valerie moved to study the feeds with the focused intensity of a chess master seeing the board shift. "They found the garage," she said quietly. "But do they know about the tunnels?" "Only one way to find out." Ethan grabbed his jacket, the same oil-stained flannel he'd worn the night they met. "I need to go up there, act normal. If I don't show my face, they'll know something's wrong." "That's suicide," Morrison protested from where he'd been reviewing legal documents with Father O'Brien. "You go up there alone. You're not coming back." "He won't be alone," Tommy said, already signaling to Martinez and Williams. "We'll be shadows. First sign of trouble, we intervene." "No heroics." Valerie grabbed Ethan's arm, her grip fierce. "You go up, you check the garage, you come back. Don't engage unless you have no choice." "When have I ever been heroic?" Ethan tried for a light tone, but the worry in her eyes killed the joke. "I'll be careful. Promise." The journey from the tunnels to the surface felt longer than usual, each step carrying him closer to danger. Eddie had shown them 12 different routes to avoid detection, but Ethan took the most direct one, emerging through a basement access in the abandoned building next to his garage. If they were watching, better to come from an unexpected direction. The morning air bit at his face as he circled around to approach the garage from the front, walking with the exhausted shuffle of a man who'd been drinking all night. Let them think he was broken, defeated. Let them underestimate him the way everyone always had. The sedan's window rolled down as he fumbled with his keys. A face appeared, not one of Ridgemont's usual thugs, but something worse. Professional, clean-shaven, unremarkable features, the kind of man who could disappear in any crowd. "Mr. Cross." The voice was polite, almost friendly. "Might we have a word? We're closed." Ethan didn't look up, kept fumbling with the keys. "Come back Monday." "I'm afraid this can't wait." The car door opened and the man stepped out. Average height, average build, but he moved with the controlled grace of someone trained in violence. "Mr. Ridgemont would like to discuss a business proposition." "Not interested." Ethan got the door open, started to step inside, but the man's hand caught the doorframe. "Please, Mr. Cross, let's be civilized about this. You helped Ms. Hartley during her episode. Nobody blames you for that. You saw someone in distress and acted on instinct. Admirable, really. But now she's getting the help she needs, and it's time for everyone to move on." "Like I said, not interested." Ethan tried to close the door, but the man's foot was there now. $100,000. The man pulled out an envelope thick with cash. "Just to listen. Another $400,000 if you agree to our terms. $500,000, Mr. Cross. Enough to save this garage, pay your debts, start over somewhere warm. All we need is your cooperation." Ethan finally looked at him directly. "What kind of cooperation?" "A statement, on camera, saying that Ms. Hartley was unstable, that she made wild accusations, that she threatened you if you didn't help her. Help us, help her, Mr. Cross. She needs treatment, not enablers." The rage that filled Ethan was ice cold, the kind that made his hand steady instead of shaking. They wanted him to betray Valerie, to be the final nail in the coffin they were building around her reputation. "Get off my property." His voice was quiet, dangerous. The man sighed, tucked the envelope away. "I was hoping you'd be reasonable. Mr. Ridgemont values reason, but he also understands that sometimes—" He pulled back his jacket, revealing a holstered pistol.
Sometimes people need stronger persuasion. Is that a threat? It's a fact. You're going to help us, Mr. Cross, either voluntarily for considerable compensation or, well, Detroit is a dangerous city. Mechanics get robbed all the time. Sometimes they don't survive the experience. Ethan heard the slight scuff of boots on concrete Tommy's men getting into position, but he also heard something else. Another car engine approaching fast. The black SUV screeched around the corner and Ethan recognized the bald man from that first night, jaw still wired from where Ethan had hit him. 3 more men piled out, and these weren't professionals like the first man. These were street muscle, the kind who enjoyed their work. "Change of plans," the bald man lisped through his wired jaw. Mr. Ridgemont decided we don't need his cooperation after all. Dead men can't contradict the story we're telling. The professional looked annoyed. "This isn't what was discussed." "Plans change." The bald man pulled out a crowbar, testing its weight. "Besides, I owe this bastard some payback." Ethan backed toward the garage, but they were spreading out, cutting off his escape routes. His hand found the wrench in his back pocket, his father's wrench still carrying the weight of that first night. 6 against 1, the bald man said. "How's that for odds, hero?" "Could be worse," Ethan said, then raised his voice. "Could be 6 against 7. Tommy and his men materialized from the shadows like ghosts becoming solid. Williams dropped from a fire escape landing behind 2 of the thugs. Martinez emerged from behind a dumpster shotgun trained on the professional. Tommy himself stepped out of the abandoned building's doorway, assault rifle held with casual competence. "Morning, gentlemen," Tommy said cheerfully. "Beautiful day for a misunderstanding, don't you think?" The professional reacted first, his hand moving for his weapon, but Martinez's shotgun racking stopped him cold. "I wouldn't," Martinez advised. "This is loaded with deer slugs. At this range, it'll turn you into modern art nobody wants to see." The bald man's face contorted with rage. "You think this changes anything? We know where you live, all of you, your families, your friends. You can't protect everyone forever." "No," a new voice said, and everyone turned to see Valerie stepping out of Ethan's garage, where she'd apparently been waiting the whole time. "But I can." She looked magnificent in terrifying designer suit that she'd somehow acquired hair-perfect makeup covering the last of her bruises. She held a tablet in one hand and a phone in the other, both displaying streams of data. "Hello, Marcus," she said to the bald man. "That is your name, isn't it? Marcus Webb? Formerly of Blackwater Security, dishonorably discharged for excessive force in Iraq. Currently employed by Ridgemont Holdings through a shell company that doesn't technically exist." Marcus stepped forward, but 3 rifle barrels tracking his movement stopped him. "Your mother lives at 4427 Maple Street," Valerie continued, reading from her tablet. "Lovely woman, volunteers at the community center. Your ex-wife just started a new job at the Ford plant. Congratulations to her, by the way. Your daughter just made honor roll at Cass Technical High School. Bright future ahead of her. You threatening my family." Marcus's voice was strangled with rage and fear. "No, I'm protecting them." Valerie's smile was sharp as winter ice. "As of 10 minutes ago, they're under the protective services of Hartley Security, a subsidiary of my company that your boss didn't manage to steal. 24-hour protection, all expenses paid for as long as necessary. They're safe, Marcus. The question is, are you—" She turned to the professional. "Mr. Smith, and yes, that's actually your real name. How disappointingly bland your handlers at the agency you definitely don't work for might be interested to know about your side business with Ridgemont. I'm sure the Congressional Intelligence Committee would love to hear about CIA assets moonlighting as corporate enforcers." Smith's face had gone pale. "You have no proof. I have your bank records, your communication logs, recordings of you discussing wet work with Ridgemont." She held up her phone, played a few seconds of crystal-clear audio that made Smith step back. "Here's what's going to happen," Valerie announced. "You're all going to leave. You're going to tell Ridgemont that Ethan Cross is untouchable, that this garage is untouchable, that anyone associated with me is untouchable. Because if anything happens to any of them, every piece of dirt I have on all of you goes public. Your careers end. Your lives as you know them end, and that's if you're lucky." "You're bluffing."
Marcus said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Am I? Valerie pulled up another screen. This is a live feed of your mother's house, Marcus. Wave to her she's watching through her security camera, wondering why there's a nice young man from Hartley Security at her door with flowers and a protection contract. Marcus looked at the screen and saw his mother answering the door, saw her smile at whatever the security operative was saying. You crazy bitch, he whispered. No, Valerie corrected. I'm a Hartley. We protect our own. And as of now, Ethan Cross is under my protection. Touch him, and I'll destroy you so thoroughly your grandchildren will change their names. The standoff stretched taut as piano wire. 6 men with guns all pointed at each other, while a billionaire in designer heels held them all hostage with information instead of bullets. Finally, Smith holstered his weapon. This isn't over. No, Valerie agreed. It's not. But your part in it is, leave now. They left, but not before Marcus looked back at Ethan with murder in his eyes. This ain't finished between us. Looking forward to it, Ethan replied. As the vehicles disappeared around the corner, Valerie's composed mask cracked. She sagged against the garage wall, hands shaking. Ethan caught her before she could fall, held her while she trembled with released adrenaline. That was insane, he said into her hair. Brilliant, but insane. I couldn't let them hurt you. Her voice was muffled against his chest. Not after everything. How did you even know they'd be here? Diana's been monitoring their communications. When they started moving assets toward the garage, I knew they were making a play. So I made one of my own. Tommy approached, rifle now slung over his shoulder. That was some display, Miss Hartley, but they'll be back. Men like that don't forget being humiliated. Let them come. Valerie straightened the steel, returning to her spine. Every move they make, we're watching. Every communication we're recording. They're playing checkers while we're playing chess. We should get back to the tunnels, Morrison said, appearing from wherever he'd been observing. If they're getting bold enough to move in daylight, things are escalating. They returned underground to find the command center in controlled chaos. Diana had intercepted communications showing Ridgemont was accelerating his timeline. The board meeting had been moved up to immediately after the gala. If they succeeded in removing Valerie as CEO that night, everything her father had built would be carved up and sold within days. We need to move up our timeline too, Diana said, fingers flying over her keyboard. I found something in the financial records Ridgemont's been embezzling from the pension fund. Not just skimming, but wholesale theft. Hundreds of millions meant for retired workers redirected to offshore accounts. That's our smoking gun, Morrison said. Pension theft is federal. FBI jurisdiction, not local cops he might have bought. It's more than that, Father O'Brien said from where he'd been coordinating with his network. Those pensions belong to 30,000 retired auto workers. Their families, their communities. You show them that Ridgemont stole their futures and this city will riot. We don't want a riot, Valerie said quickly. We want justice. Sometimes they're the same thing, Jackson observed. He'd been quiet studying maps of the gala venue. Rich men like Ridgemont, they count on people being too tired, too beaten down to fight back. But you wake up the right anger point, it in the right direction. We're not starting a war, Ethan said firmly. We're ending one. The war they've been waging on working people for decades. Over the next 2 days, their plan crystallized into something elegant and devastating. Diana would infiltrate the gala's systems, not just to display evidence, but to broadcast it live to every screen in Detroit. Mike would ensure emergency broadcast protocols were activated. Father O'Brien's people would be positioned throughout the venue as waitstaff and service workers invisible until needed. But the masterpiece was Valerie's idea. We don't just show them the evidence, she explained, standing before a whiteboard covered in diagrams. We make them confess, in front of everyone. How? Williams asked. The same way they've been destroying companies for years, hostile takeover. She smiled, and it was beautiful and terrible. While they're all at the gala thinking they've won, Diana will be executing trades. Using the money Ridgemont stole, we're going to buy controlling interests in every shell company he uses. By the time dessert is served, I won't just own my father's company again, I'll own theirs too. That's... Morrison started, then stopped. That's probably illegal. Using stolen money to buy the companies that stole it. Valerie shrugged. Let the lawyers sort it out. By then the truth will be public. Every dirty secret, every crime, every person they've destroyed. The city will demand justice and will have given them the proof to get it. The day of the gala tension in the tunnels could have been cut with a knife. Everyone understood this was it succeed tonight or lose everything. Tommy's men cleaned and checked weapons they hoped not to use. Diana ran through system vulnerabilities one more time. Mike confirmed all broadcast protocols were ready. Ethan found Valerie standing alone in a side tunnel, staring at nothing. She'd changed into the gown black silk that cost more than most people's car's diamonds at her throat that caught the industrial lighting and threw it back in rainbow fragments. She looked like what she was a billionaire preparing for war. You don't have to do this, he said. We could run the whole operation from here. No. She turned to him and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I need to face them. Need to look Ridgemont in the eye when his world burns. My father would have wanted that. Your father would have wanted you safe. My father would have wanted justice. She moved closer, rested her forehead against his chest. I'm scared, Ethan, terrified, but I'm also ready to end this. Whatever happens, I'll be right beside you. She looked up at him. You can't go to the gala. You don't have an invitation. Actually, Tommy interrupted, appearing with a garment bag. He does. Martinez's cousin works for the rental company. One tuxedo slightly irregular, but it'll do. Ethan stared at the bag. I don't know how to... You stand beside her, Tommy said simply. You watch her back. You be what you've been from the start, the man who steps in when everyone else steps back. An hour later, Ethan stood before a mirror, barely recognizing himself. The tuxedo transformed him, hiding the mechanic and revealing something else. Not a billionaire, never that, but a man who belonged beside one. Valerie appeared, took his breath away all over again. You clean up nice, Mr. Cross. You're going to set that place on fire just walking in, Ms. Hartley. That's the plan. She took his arm, ready to crash a party. The ride to the venue, the Detroit Institute of Arts. Because Ridgemont loved the irony of plotting the city's destruction, surrounded by its cultural treasures, felt both endless and too quick. Morrison drove using an unmarked car, talking them through final protocols. First sign of real danger, you leave. No heroics, no last stands. We can broadcast the evidence without you there. Understood, Valerie lied. They pulled up to the valet station, and Ethan saw the moment Valerie transformed. Between one breath and the next, she became someone else, cold, confident, untouchable. The broken woman from the alley was gone, replaced by a predator in designer shoes. The valet's eyes widened, recognizing her, but Valerie was already moving, gliding up the museum steps like she owned them. Which Ethan realized she probably did. Her family had been major donors for decades. The security at the door hesitated. They'd clearly been told to watch for her, but she wasn't skulking or hiding. She was walking in the front door like a queen returning to her palace. Miss Hartley, one guard said nervously. We weren't expecting... I'm the CEO of Hartley Industries, she said, voice carrying across the entrance where early arrivals were watching. This is a company function. Are you really going to make a scene by refusing me entry in front of all these witnesses, all these cameras? The guard looked desperately for guidance, but Valerie was already past him. Ethan at her side, entering the main hall where Detroit's elite mingled beneath million-dollar paintings. The room's reaction rippled outward from their entrance. Conversations stopped. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. 100 faces turned to stare at the woman who was supposed to be locked in a psychiatric ward, and the nobody mechanic who'd somehow become her guardian. Then Ethan saw him. Ridgemont holding court near a Rembrandt, surrounded by judges and politicians like a king with his courtiers. Their eyes met across the room, and Ridgemont smiled. It was the smile of a man who thought he'd already won. He started walking toward them, the crowd parting before him. His own security materialized from the crowd. Not the street thugs from before, but professionals in tuxedos with barely concealed weapons. Valerie, Ridgemont said warmly, loud enough for everyone to hear. How wonderful that you could join us. I trust you're feeling better. Never better, James. Her smile was razor sharp. I wouldn't miss tonight for the world. And Mr. Cross. Ridgemont's eyes flicked dismissively over Ethan. I didn't realize mechanics were invited to these events. He's my +1, Valerie said. Unless the company has a policy against that, I'd hate to have to review the discrimination policies with HR. Ridgemont's smile tightened. Of course not. Please enjoy the evening. The board meeting afterward should be illuminating. As he walked away, Ethan heard him murmur to his security. The words were unclear, but the intent wasn't. They had maybe an hour before things went very wrong. Diana, Valerie said quietly, seemingly to herself, but actually to the nearly invisible earpiece she wore. Light it up. Across the room, every screen, phones, tablets, the massive presentation displays flickered. Then, as the city's elite mingled and plotted their crimes, began to play out in high definition for all to see. The first video was Ridgemont himself recorded in what he'd thought was a secure office, bragging about the pension theft. 30,000 retirees? They're sheep. They'll take whatever scraps we throw them while we feast on their futures. The room erupted, not in anger, not yet, but in shock. People pulled out phones, tried to turn them off, but Diana had locked them all. Every screen in the building had become a window into corruption. What is this? Ridgemont roared, his composed mask finally cracking. This, Valerie said, her voice carrying across the chaos, is justice. Everything you've done, every life you've destroyed, every dollar you've stolen, it's all here, James, and it's not just playing in this room. She gestured to the windows where they could see the giant screens in Campus Martius Park, lighting up with the same footage. Mike had done his job. Emergency broadcast systems across the city were carrying the signal. In homes and bars and phones across Detroit, people were watching their exploitation laid bare. You're finished, Ridgemont snarled, signaling his security. You just signed your own death warrant. But as his men moved forward, other figures stepped from the crowd. Father O'Brien's people waiters and janitors and service workers who'd been invisible until now formed a protective circle around Valerie and Ethan. I don't think so, Father O'Brien said, appearing in his collar, despite the black-tie dress code. You see, Mr. Ridgemont, you made a classic mistake. You forgot that the people who serve your drinks and clean your offices have ears, have phones, have families you've destroyed. More screens lit up with testimony from Ridgemont's victims. Factory workers whose jobs he'd eliminated. Small business owners he'd crushed. Families thrown into poverty by his schemes. Then Diana delivered the killing blow. Ladies and gentlemen, her voice came through the sound system. I'd like to announce some recent acquisitions. As of 15 minutes ago, using funds recovered from illegal accounts, Ms. Valerie Hartley now owns controlling interests in Ridgemont Holdings Phoenix Capital and 17 other shell companies. In simple terms, she doesn't just own her father's company again. She owns yours too, James. Ridgemont's face went from red to white. He pulled out his phone, frantically calling his lawyers, his bankers, anyone who could tell him this wasn't happening. But it was. On the screens, legal documents scrolled past, transfer papers, SEC filings, all of it legitimate, all of it irreversible. You used my money to destroy me, Ridgemont's voice was barely human. I used stolen money to return it to its rightful owners, Valerie corrected. Every penny you stole from those pension funds will be returned. Every company you destroyed will be rebuilt. Every family you crushed will be made whole. That's what real justice looks like. The room was chaos now. Some of Ridgemont's associates were trying to flee, but police were already at the exits. Not the corrupt cops on his payroll, but federal agents Morrison had been coordinating with for days. Ridgemont made one last desperate play. He pulled a gun from inside his jacket, pointed it at Valerie. You've destroyed everything. But Ethan was already moving. The wrench wasn't in his pocket. You couldn't bring a wrench to a gala, but a champagne bottle worked just as well. It connected with Ridgemont's wrist, sending the gun spinning across the marble floor. They went down together, Ethan and Ridgemont rolling across the floor while the elite of Detroit watched in shock. It wasn't a long fight. Ridgemont was soft, used to others doing his violence. Ethan had been breaking things and fixing things with his hands his whole life. When security finally pulled them apart, Ridgemont's perfect face was somewhat less perfect, and Ethan's rented tux was ruined. But Valerie was safe, and on every screen in Detroit, the truth continued to play. It's over, Morrison said, appearing with federal agents. James Ridgemont, you're under arrest for embezzlement, conspiracy, attempted murder, and about 40 other charges we're still tallying. As they dragged him away, Ridgemont looked back at Valerie with pure hatred. This isn't over. I have friends' resources you can't imagine. You have nothing, Valerie interrupted. Your accounts are frozen. Your assets are seized. Your allies are running for cover. You're done, James. My father would have shown you mercy. But I'm not my father. The aftermath was surreal. The gala continued, but now it had become something else, a celebration of justice served. The mayor, who'd arrived late and thus avoided being implicated in the recordings, made an impromptu speech about Detroit's resilience. The media, who'd been invited to cover a corporate celebration, found themselves with the story of the decade. Ethan stood to the side, watching Valerie work the room. She was magnificent, answering questions, comforting victims who'd appeared as word spread, already making plans to repair the damage Ridgemont had caused. You did good, Tommy said, appearing beside him with a glass of champagne. Both of you. We all did. This wouldn't have happened without everyone. No, but it wouldn't have started without you. That night in the alley, you could have walked away. Most men would have. I'm not most men. No, Tommy agreed. You're the kind of man your father would have been proud of. Later, as the crowd thinned and the federal agents finished their arrests, Valerie found Ethan on the museum's balcony, looking out over Detroit's lights. Penny for your thoughts. Just thinking about how 12 hours ago we were hiding in abandoned subway tunnels, and now we're here. Having second thoughts. He turned to her, saw vulnerability beneath the victory. Never, I keep waiting to wake up, to find out this was all a dream and Ridgemont still owns everything. It's real, Ethan assured her. You did it. You saved your father's company. You saved the city. We did it, she corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you, without all of you. She moved closer, rested her head against his shoulder. Below them, Detroit sprawled in all its broken glory, a city that had been counted out 1,000 times but kept fighting. What now? Ethan asked. Now we rebuild. The company, the garage, the city, we fix what they broke. That could take a lifetime. She looked up at him, smiled. Good thing we've got one. As she kissed him there on the balcony with the city lights as witness and their enemies in custody, Ethan thought about the strange paths life could take. A week ago, he'd been a failed mechanic facing eviction. Now he stood beside a billionaire who'd trusted him with everything, who'd shown him that sometimes the biggest fights were worth having. Inside, Diana's voice came through their earpieces. Hate to interrupt, but we've got movement. 3 black SUVs approaching from the north, not law enforcement signatures. The fight wasn't over. Ridgemont had been the head, but the body of corruption still writhed. There would be more battles, more dangerous nights, more moments when everything hung in the balance. But for now, for this moment, they'd won. The wolves had circled, had shown their teeth had tried to tear them apart, and they'd failed. Ready for round 2? Valerie asked Steele, returning to her voice. With you. Ethan picked up a champagne bottle, tested its weight. Not as good as a wrench, but it would do. Always. They walked back inside together, ready for whatever came next. Behind them, Detroit's lights continued to burn, a city that knew how to take a punch and come back swinging. The wolves were still out there, circling in the dark. But now they knew the truth sometimes. The prey had teeth too. The 3 black SUVs screeched to a halt outside the museum, just as Ethan and Valerie reached the main hall. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, they could see men in tactical gear pouring out. But these weren't police or federal agents. Their movements were too precise, too military. Private contractors, the kind that operated in legal gray zones where money mattered more than jurisdiction. Extraction team. Tommy identified immediately, his Marine training reading their formation. They're not here to arrest anyone. They're here to disappear someone. Me, Valerie said quietly. Ridgemont must have had a contingency plan. If he couldn't control the company, he'd make sure I couldn't either. Morrison was already on his radio calling for backup, but everyone knew it wouldn't arrive in time. The federal agents had left with their prisoners. The regular cops were 20 minutes out. By then, whatever was going to happen would be over. The server room. Diana's voice crackled through their earpieces. Get to the museum server room. I can lock it down, buy us time. They moved as a group, Valerie in her gown and diamonds, Ethan in his ruined tux, Tommy and his men forming a protective formation around them. Behind them, they heard the main doors crash open, heard shouted commands in what sounded like Serbian or Russian. The server room was in the basement, accessed through a service corridor that the public never saw. Maria, one of Father O'Brien's people who'd been working as waitstaff, appeared from nowhere to guide them. "This way," she hissed. "Quickly." They descended into the mechanical bowels of the building, the elegant marble giving way to concrete and exposed pipes. The server room door was reinforced steel with an electronic lock that Diana had already hacked. "Inside now," Tommy ordered, but as they moved toward the door, footsteps echoed from both ends of the corridor. They were trapped.
"Well," William said, checking his weapon, "this is about to get interesting." The first wave hit them from the north end of the corridor. 4 men in black tactical gear moving with professional precision. Tommy and Martinez opened fire. Their shots controlled and accurate, dropping 2 immediately. But more were coming from the other direction. "Get her inside," Ethan shouted, shoving Valerie toward the server room door just as bullets started flying. The concrete walls sparked and chipped as rounds impacted around them. They tumbled through the door, Diana slamming it shut electronically behind them. The server room was cramped, filled with humming towers of computers that controlled the museum's climate security and digital infrastructure. But more importantly, it had something else. "The backup connection," Diana said, already at a terminal. "Direct fiber optic to the city's emergency communication grid. If I can access it, we can broadcast everything everywhere."
"Not just Detroit nationwide."
"Do it," Valerie ordered, then turned to Ethan. "But they'll breach that door eventually." "Let them come," Ethan said, looking around the room. Servers meant cooling systems. Cooling systems meant industrial chemicals. His mechanic's mind was already working the problem. "Diana, can you trigger a halon gas discharge in the corridor?" "That's the fire suppression system. It'll suffocate anyone out there." "No, not halon. This is an old building. They'll have CO2 systems. Non-lethal, but it'll disorient them, buy us time." Diana's fingers flew across the keyboard. 30 seconds. The door shuddered as something heavy hit it from outside. The extraction team had brought breaching charges. "Whatever you're going to do it fast," Tommy said, blood running down his arm from a graze he hadn't mentioned. "Ethan," Valerie grabbed his hand. "If we don't make it, we're making it." He pulled her close, kissed her hard. "I didn't save you from that alley just to lose you in a basement. Besides, we've got something they don't." "What's that home field advantage?" He turned to Diana. "Can you access the museum's security feeds? All of them." "Already done." "Good. Show me what we're dealing with." The screens lit up with feeds from throughout the building. 24 men total, all heavily armed, all converging on their position. But Ethan noticed something else. They were being careful not to damage any artwork moving through the galleries with almost reverent care. "They have orders," Valerie realized. "Preserve the art at all costs. The museum's board would crucify anyone who damaged the collection." "So we use that," Ethan said. "Diana, emergency broadcast. Now." "I need more time." The door exploded inward. Everything happened in slow motion and fast forward simultaneously. The CO2 discharge filled the corridor with white fog. Tommy and Williams opened fire through the doorway. Someone threw a flashbang that turned the world into white light and screaming sound. When Ethan's vision cleared, 3 extraction team members were in the room. One had Valerie by the arm, trying to drag her toward the door. Without thinking, Ethan grabbed a server rack and brought it down on the man's head, sending thousands of dollars of equipment and 1 military contractor to the floor. Tommy was grappling with another, while Williams had the third in a chokehold. But more were coming through the smoke-filled corridor. "Done?" Diana shouted. "Broadcasting now." Every screen in the room, every display in the museum, every television and phone and computer screen in a 3-state radius suddenly showed the same thing, a live feed of the server room of Valerie Hartley fighting for her life against mysterious armed men. "My name is Valerie Hartley," she said, speaking directly to Diana's phone camera even as chaos erupted around her.
I'm at the Detroit Institute of Arts, and corporate mercenaries are trying to kidnap or kill me for exposing corruption that goes to the heart of American business. If something happens to me, know that I fought for truth, for justice, for the workers whose lives were destroyed by greed. The extraction team leader appeared in the doorway, saw the cameras, understood immediately what was happening. His orders hadn't covered this, a live broadcast to millions, turning what should have been a quiet disappearance into a public execution. "Stand down!" he ordered his men, but it was too late. The sound of helicopters filled the air, not one or two, but a dozen. FBI, ATF, Homeland Security, Michigan State Police, Detroit PD. Every agency with air assets was converging on the museum. Diana's broadcast had done more than expose the truth. It had created a situation where every law enforcement agency in the state had to respond or face public outrage. "Exfil now!" The team leader shouted, but Tommy's team had recovered, were laying down covering fire. The extraction team retreated professionally, maintaining cover, but retreating nonetheless. "They're running," Morrison's voice came through the radio. "We've got them boxed in. Nobody's getting out." But Ethan knew better. Men like this always had contingency plans. "Diana, can you track them through the museum?" "Already on it." Her screen showed the extraction team moving not toward the exits, but deeper into the building toward the loading docks. "They've got vehicles waiting. If they reach them." "They won't." Valerie's voice was steel. She grabbed a radio from one of the downed contractors. "This is Valerie Hartley to whoever's running this operation. I have a proposition." Static, then a cultured voice with a slight accent. "Ms. Hartley, this is unexpected. Everything about tonight has been unexpected. But here's what's going to happen. Your men are going to surrender. They're going to testify about who hired them. And in exchange, I don't release the files I have on Darkwater International's illegal operations in 6 countries. Silence. Ethan looked at her in amazement. "You have files on them." "I have files on everyone," she said quietly. "My father taught me to never enter a fight without knowing everyone's secrets." The radio crackled. "You're bluffing." Tehran 2019, Baghdad 2020, Caracas 2021. Should I continue, or should we discuss the senator whose campaign you illegally funded, the judge whose son you helped disappear after that unfortunate incident in Miami? Another long silence. Then, terms. Simple. Your men stand down, surrender peacefully, and testify that they were hired by James Ridgemont to kidnap me. In exchange, your company's secrets stay secret. And if we refuse, then in about 30 seconds, every intelligence agency in the world learns about your operations. I imagine the international warrants alone would be inconvenient. Ethan could hear the calculation in the silence that followed. The mathematics of survival profit and loss playing out in real time. "Stand down," the voice finally ordered. "All units stand down and prepare for custody." The screen showed the extraction team dropping their weapons, raising their hands as law enforcement flooded the building. It was over, but Valerie wasn't done. She turned back to Diana's camera, to the millions still watching. "This is what they do," she said. "When we expose their corruption, they send armed men. When we demand justice, they try to silence us. But we're not silent anymore. We're not afraid anymore. Tonight, Detroit showed that we can fight back, that we can win." She looked directly into the camera, and Ethan saw not the frightened woman from the alley, or even the CEO reclaiming her company, but something more, a leader, a warrior, someone who'd been forged in fire and come out stronger. To everyone watching, everyone who's been stepped on, cheated, destroyed by people like Ridgemont, know this. You're not alone. We're building something new, something better. And we're just getting started. Diana cut the feed as law enforcement secured the scene. The server room that had been a battleground moments before now felt strangely quiet, just the hum of computers and the distant sound of sirens. "We should go," Morrison said, appearing in the doorway. "There'll be hours of questions, statements, paperwork." "In a moment," Valerie said. She turned to Ethan, Tommy Williams, Diana. All of them bloodied and exhausted, but victorious. "Thank you, all of you. You risked everything for someone you barely knew." "We knew enough," Tommy said simply.
We knew you were worth fighting for. Besides, Williams added with a grin, this is the most fun I've had since Afghanistan. They emerged from the museum into a media circus. Every news outlet in the country had descended on Detroit, drawn by the dramatic footage of billionaire versus mercenaries. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and through it all, Valerie walked with her head high, Ethan at her side. Ms. Hartley, how does it feel to have survived an assassination attempt? Ms. Hartley, what's next for Hartley Industries? Ms. Hartley, is it true you're dating your bodyguard? That last one made Ethan snort. Bodyguard, is that what they were calling him now? Valerie stopped at a podium. Someone had hastily set up the DIA's columns, rising behind her like monuments to civilization that had almost been destroyed by greed. I'll take a few questions, she said, and the crowd pressed forward. What's next for Ridgemont's companies now that you own them? They'll be restructured. Every stolen pension will be repaid with interest. Every worker who was laid off to boost stock prices will be offered their job back. We're going to prove that companies can be profitable without being predatory. How were you able to buy those companies? I used the money Ridgemont stole. It seemed poetic justice to use his own corruption against him. Of course, all of this will be handled through the courts. I believe in justice, not revenge. What about the extraction team who sent them? That will come out in the investigation. But let me be clear, whoever thought they could silence the truth through violence has learned otherwise. Detroit doesn't back down from bullies, whether they're in boardrooms or carrying guns. Is it true you've been hiding in abandoned subway tunnels? Valerie smiled. I've been staying with friends, good friends who reminded me that strength doesn't come from money or position. It comes from standing up for what's right even when you're scared, especially when you're scared. She looked at Ethan when she said it, and every camera caught the look that passed between them. One more question, she said. What about your relationship with Ethan Cross? What about it? She took Ethan's hand, pulled him to the podium. Ethan saved my life when everyone else would have looked away. He stood against impossible odds because it was the right thing to do. He's the kind of man this city was built by, honest, hardworking, unwilling to back down from a fight. If that's not worth loving, I don't know what is. She kissed him then in front of the cameras and the world, and for a moment Ethan forgot about everything else, the violence, the corruption, the uncertain future. There was just Valerie, brilliant and brave, and somehow his. When they broke apart, the crowd was applauding. Even the cynical reporters seemed moved by the moment the billionaire and the mechanic, proof that sometimes different worlds could collide and create something beautiful. Morrison drove them away from the scene, but not back to the tunnels. Those would have to be abandoned now that their existence was public knowledge. Instead, they went to a safe house. Tommy had arranged a penthouse apartment that one of Valerie's loyal board members had offered. The space was everything Ethan's garage wasn't: marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, furniture that cost more than he'd made in a year. But it felt empty, sterile, nothing like the underground community they'd built. I miss our tunnel, Valerie said, reading his thoughts. It wasn't much, but it was ours. We'll build something better, a real headquarters for what comes next. What does come next? Ethan asked. They were standing at the windows looking out over Detroit's lights. Ridgemont's in custody, his networks exposed. You've got your company back. Seems like we won. We won a battle, Valerie corrected. But the war's just beginning. Ridgemont was one of hundreds, maybe thousands. Every major city has its parasites, its corporate vampires bleeding communities dry. We've proven they can be beaten. Now we need to spread that message. You want to take this national. I want to take it global. But first, she turned to face him fully. First, I want to rebuild your garage. Valerie, no arguments. That garage represents everything we're fighting for: honest work, family, legacy, community roots. We're going to make it the flagship of something new. A place where people don't just fix cars, but where they learn trades. Start businesses, build futures. That's a long way from a 3-bay garage in a bad neighborhood. That's the point. Transformation. Taking something broken and making it better than it ever was. Diana appeared from one of the bedrooms, laptop in hand. You both need to see this. The screen showed financial markets in chaos. Hartley Industries stock was soaring, but more interesting was what was happening to other companies. Across the board, corporations with histories of worker exploitation were seeing massive sell-offs.
It's a movement, Diana explained. Pension funds, mutual funds, individual investors, they're all pulling money from companies that look like Ridgemont's operation. They're calling it the Detroit effect. My God, Valerie whispered. We actually did it. We changed things. It's just starting, Diana warned. The pushback will be severe. Every CEO in America is watching this, planning how to prevent it from spreading. Let them plan, Ethan said. We've got something they don't. What's that? The truth, and an army of people willing to fight for it. His phone buzzed. Tommy. You need to turn on Channel 7. The screen showed a breaking news alert. FBI raids were happening across the country. Companies connected to Ridgemont's network were being searched, executives arrested. The corruption ran deeper than even they'd suspected. Senators, judges, police chiefs all caught in the web Diana had exposed. But the real shock came at the end of the broadcast. In related news, anonymous sources have leaked documents suggesting similar corruption networks in New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, and dozens of other cities. It appears Detroit's fight against corporate corruption has inspired whistleblowers nationwide. The revolution's starting, Father O'Brien said. He'd arrived with supplies and updates from the street. The people I minister to, the forgotten ones they're talking about, you like your heroes, like you've given them hope. We're not heroes, Ethan said. We just got tired of losing. Sometimes that's all heroism is, the priest replied. Getting tired enough of injustice to finally do something about it. The night wore on, but nobody slept. Plans were made, alliances forged, strategies developed. By dawn, they had the framework of something unprecedented, a network of citizens, workers, and ethical business leaders united against corruption. We'll need a name, Williams suggested, something people can rally behind. The Detroit Principle, Valerie said, the idea that a city, a community, a nation is only as strong as how it treats its most vulnerable workers. I like it, Ethan said, but principles need practice. We can't just expose corruption, we need to build alternatives, show people that business can be ethical and profitable. That's where the garage comes in, Valerie said. We'll start there. Rebuild it as a training center, a small business incubator, a symbol of renewal. Then we replicate it. Every city that joins the movement gets their own version. That'll take massive funding, Diana pointed out. I have massive funding, and once we liquidate Ridgemont's illegal assets, we'll have more. Money that was stolen from workers going back to build their futures. Morrison, who'd been quietly coordinating with federal agencies, looked up from his phone. There's something else. The Attorney General wants to meet with you, both of you. They're creating a task force to investigate corporate corruption nationwide. They want you to advise. Legitimacy, Tommy observed. You're going from rebels to establishment. No, Valerie said firmly. We're forcing the establishment to change. There's a difference. As the sun rose over Detroit, painting the city in shades of gold and possibility, Ethan found himself thinking about his father again. The old man had died believing that honest work would be rewarded, that integrity mattered more than profit. He'd been wrong about the world he lived in, but maybe, just maybe, he'd be right about the world they were building. You're thinking about your dad, Valerie said, reading him as she always seemed to. Yeah, wondering what he'd make of all this. He'd be proud. You took the values he taught you and used them to change the world. We're not done changing it yet. No, she agreed, taking his hand. We're just getting started. Outside Detroit was waking up to a new reality. The news was spreading through social media, coffee shops, assembly lines. The rich and powerful could be beaten. The corrupt could be exposed. The city that had been left for dead was rising again, and this time it was bringing the whole country with it. There's one more thing, Diana said, a smile playing at her lips. Someone leaked our story to Hollywood. 3 different studios are bidding for the rights. Ethan laughed. A movie about us. About all of us, Valerie said. About Detroit. About what happens when ordinary people do extraordinary things. Who'd believe it? Ethan asked. A billionaire heiress and a broke mechanic taking down a corporate conspiracy. Sometimes the best stories are the ones that shouldn't be true, but are, Morrison said. As they stood there planning the next phase of their impossible revolution, Ethan's phone rang. An unknown number, but something made him answer. Mr. Cross. The voice was old, refined, careful. My name is Richard Hartley, Jr. I'm Valerie's uncle. I've been watching what you've accomplished, what you've done for my niece, for my brother's company, for this city. Ethan put the phone on speaker. Valerie's face went pale. Uncle Richard, I thought you were dead. No, my dear, though I've let certain people believe that for the last 2 years. I've been investigating Ridgemont from the shadows, gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment. You and Mr. Cross created that moment. Where are you? Valerie demanded. Close. But that's not important right now. What's important is what I'm about to send you. Diana, check your secure server. Diana's fingers flew across her keyboard. Her eyes widened. This is everything. Every corporate conspiracy in America for the last 20 years. Names, dates, amounts. It's all here. My brother and I always suspected this day would come, Richard Jr. said, when the corruption would become too much, when someone would have to stand up. I'm old Valerie, too old to fight this fight. But you and Mr. Cross, you have the strength, the courage, the moral clarity to use this information wisely. This is enough to bring down half of corporate America, Valerie breathed. Then perhaps it's time for the other half to rise, Richard Jr. replied. The honest half. The half that believes in building rather than destroying. Mr. Cross, take care of my niece. Valerie, your father would be so proud. Both of you be careful. You've wounded the beast, but wounded beasts are the most dangerous. The line went dead. They stood in silence, absorbing the magnitude of what they'd just received. It was more than evidence, it was a weapon that could reshape American business. We could destroy them all, William said quietly. Or we could offer them a choice, Ethan suggested. Reform or be exposed. Change their ways or face justice. Use the threat to force real change. The carrot and the stick, Father O'Brien approved. Redemption for those who seek it. Judgment for those who refuse. It's going to be a long fight, Morrison warned. Years, maybe decades. Then we better get started, Valerie said. She moved to the window, looking out over Detroit. Diana set up a press conference for noon, full media international coverage. What are you going to announce? Ethan asked. She turned to him, and in her eyes he saw the same fire he'd seen in that alley, but tempered now with purpose and possibility. The Detroit principle goes national. Every company in America gets a choice: join us in building an ethical economy or face investigation. Workers' rights become human rights. Corporate corruption becomes corporate suicide. We're going to build the world my father dreamed of, one business at a time. They'll fight back, Ethan warned. Good, Valerie said, and her smile was sharp as winter. I'm done playing defense. It's time to show them what happens when you wake the sleeping giant of American workers. As noon approached and the media gathered for what would become known as the announcement that changed American capitalism, Ethan stood beside Valerie, ready for whatever came next. They'd started in an alley with violence and fear. They were continuing with truth and justice, but most importantly, they were continuing together. The digital warhead had been armed and fired. Now they just had to win the war. The contraction started at 3 a.m., on a Tuesday exactly, 18 months after that first night in the alley. Ethan drove through empty Detroit streets, Valerie gripping his hand hard enough to leave bruises, the same streets where their story had begun, now leading them toward its next chapter. You're going 30 in a 50 zone, Valerie gasped between contractions. I'm being careful. Ethan Cross, you drove 90 miles an hour to save me from mercenaries, and now you're being careful. He pressed harder on the accelerator, remembering that night at the museum, the desperate race through the city. So much had changed, yet here they were again, racing through darkness toward an uncertain future. The hospital was ready for them. Being billionaire revolutionaries had some advantages, including a private room and the best doctors in Michigan. But as Valerie labored through the next 12 hours, none of that mattered. They were just another couple bringing life into the world, hoping for the best. Sarah Cross was born at 3:47 p.m., screaming her arrival with a voice that reminded Ethan of her mother's determination. She had Valerie's green eyes and what might become Ethan's stubborn jaw, though it was hard to tell beneath the newborn squish. She's perfect, Valerie whispered, holding their daughter for the first time. She's going to change the world, Ethan said, touching Sarah's impossibly small fingers. She already has. The next few days blurred together in that strange hospital time warp of joy and exhaustion. Visitors came in waves. Tommy and his team, who'd appointed themselves honorary uncles. Diana already planning Sarah's digital security for the next 18 years. Father O'Brien offering blessings and promising to keep his sermons short at the baptism. Morrison joking that he'd already opened a file for when Sarah inevitably started her own revolution. But it was Richard Hartley Jr.'s visit that brought unexpected news. "Ridgemont's dead," he said quietly, having waited until they were alone. "Killed in federal prison yesterday. They're calling it a suicide, but someone cleaned up a loose end." Valerie finished, holding Sarah closer. "Who?" "That's the interesting part. The security footage shows him alone in his cell, but Diana did some analysis. The angle of the ligature, the bruising pattern, someone helped him along. Someone with access." "Inside job," Ethan said. "Someone making sure he couldn't testify about the bigger network." "Which means the network still exists," Richard Jr. confirmed. "Wounded, hiding, but still there, still dangerous." They looked at their daughter sleeping peacefully, unaware that she'd been born into a world where her parents had powerful enemies. "We need to disappear for a while," Valerie said, "just until things settle." "No," Ethan's voice was firm. "We run. Now we'll be running her whole life. We stand and fight here in the open. That's the only way she grows up free." The decision to stay public came with consequences. Security had to be tripled. Sarah couldn't go anywhere without protection. Every playground visit was scouted in advance. Every new person in their life was thoroughly vetted. It was exhausting, but necessary. Meanwhile, the Cross-Hartley Foundation was exploding in growth. 50 cities now had garages. Over 1 million workers had gone through their training programs. The Detroit principle had become federal policy with tax incentives for companies that adopted profit-sharing and worker ownership models. But success bred new challenges. At a board meeting 6 months after Sarah's birth, the cracks began to show. "We're growing too fast," argued Jennifer Watson, their CFO. "We need to consolidate focus on what works." "Everything works," Valerie countered. "Every program, every garage, every loan we've made has succeeded. That's statistically impossible. We must be missing failures." "Or maybe," Ethan interjected, "when you treat people with respect and give them real opportunities, they don't fail as often as the experts expect." The debate continued for hours, with board members divided between aggressive expansion and cautious consolidation. It was their first real internal conflict, and it felt like a betrayal of everything they'd built together. That night, Ethan found Valerie in Sarah's nursery, rocking their daughter and crying silently. "They don't understand," she whispered. "They're turning us into just another corporation worried about metrics and growth rates instead of people." Then we remind them why we started this. He took Sarah, who gurgled happily at her father. "We didn't start a movement to create a new bureaucracy. We started it to prove business could have a heart." The solution came from an unexpected source. Maria, the former homeless woman who'd helped them in the tunnels, now ran one of their Detroit training centers. She suggested something radical. "Let the workers vote," she said at the next meeting. "Every person who's been through our programs, everyone who works at a garage, let them vote on major decisions. Real democracy, not corporate democracy." "That's thousands of people," Jennifer protested. "Millions, actually," Diana corrected, pulling up the numbers. 1.3 million direct beneficiaries, another 4 million indirect. "Then we vote electronically," Valerie said, the excitement building in her voice. "Blockchain secured, unhackable. Every major decision goes to the people it affects." "That's insane," one board member said. "That's revolutionary," Ethan countered, "and revolution is what we do." The first vote was on the expansion question: consolidate or grow. The result was overwhelming: grow, but grow smart. Let local garages decide their own needs. Trust the people on the ground. It worked better than anyone expected. Freed from top-down management, each garage evolved to meet its community's specific needs. The Detroit garage focused on automotive technology. The Silicon Valley garage became a startup incubator. The West Virginia garage specialized in transitioning coal miners to solar panel installation. But the real test came when they received an unexpected offer. Jiang Wei, one of China's richest industrialists, arrived in Detroit with a proposal.
He wanted to bring the Detroit Principle to China to transform the world's largest workforce using their model. This is huge, Jennifer said, dollar signs practically visible in her eyes. The Chinese market could triple our impact. It could also compromise our values, Morrison warned. The Chinese government isn't known for worker democracy. Ethan and Valerie were split. He worried about losing control of their message. She saw an opportunity to help billions of workers. "We vote," Valerie finally said. "Let the people decide."
The debate that followed was unlike anything they'd seen. Town halls in every garage, online forums buzzing with discussion. Workers who'd never thought about international politics suddenly engaged in deep conversations about global labor rights. Sarah, now walking and getting into everything, toddled through one town hall, and an old auto worker scooped her up. "This little one's going to inherit whatever we decide," he said to the crowd. "Question is, do we want her world bigger or smaller than ours?" The vote was closer than expected, but expansion won. However, it came with conditions drafted by the workers themselves. Any international garage had to meet the same standards as American ones. Workers had to have real voting rights. Profits had to be shared. Local management had to be elected, not appointed. Zhang Wei balked at the conditions. "You're asking me to democratize Chinese factories." "We're asking you to trust Chinese workers," Ethan corrected. "Same as we trust American ones." It took 6 months of negotiation, but eventually Zhang agreed. The first Chinese garage opened in Shenzhen, and within weeks it was packed. Workers who'd never had a voice suddenly found one. The Chinese government watched nervously but didn't intervene. The economic benefits were too significant. That success led to more international expansion. Brazil, India, Nigeria. Poland, the Detroit Principle went global. Each new country brought challenges but also innovations. The Brazilian garages pioneered cooperative farming techniques. The Nigerian ones became centers for solar technology. The Polish ones specialized in retrofitting old Soviet-era factories. But with global success came global enemies. The attack came through cyberspace first. Diana detected it at 2 a.m., calling Ethan and Valerie in panic. "They're trying to crash our entire network. Someone with serious resources, government level." They raced to the command center they'd built beneath the original garage, a high-tech nerve center that would have made their tunnel hideout look prehistoric. Diana and her team were fighting off the attack in real-time, fingers flying across keyboards. "It's coordinated," Diana reported. "Multiple state actors. Someone's united our enemies." "Can you stop it?" "I can slow it, but they're going to break through eventually." "Then we go public," Valerie said. "Diana, can you trace the attack back to its sources?" "Already done. Russia, North Korea, and Wall Street, specifically servers owned by Phoenix Holdings. Ridgemont's old company. They're trying to destroy us digitally since physical attacks failed." Ethan made the decision. Release everything, every bit of evidence about who's attacking us and why. Let the world see that autocrats and oligarchs are united in trying to stop worker democracy. The data dump was massive. Evidence of collusion between dictatorships and corporations to suppress the global labor movement. Financial transfers, encrypted communications, assassination plans. All of it released simultaneously to every major news outlet in the world. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Protests erupted in dozens of countries. Workers who'd been suspicious of the Detroit Principle saw that the opposition to it came from their oppressors. Governments that had been hostile suddenly faced internal pressure to allow garages to open. "We just started a global revolution," Morrison observed, watching news feeds from around the world. "No," Valerie said, holding Sarah, who was playing with her mother's phone. "We just revealed the revolution that was already happening." The counterattack came faster than expected. Lawsuits in every country, regulatory challenges, smear campaigns painting them as dangerous radicals. Several countries banned the garages outright, though underground versions continued operating. Then came the personal attacks. Photos of Sarah leaked online with threatening messages. Deepfake videos of Ethan and Valerie saying things they'd never said. Character assassination on an industrial scale. "We need to respond," Tommy urged. "Hit back hard." "No," Ethan said. "We respond by being ourselves, by continuing the work. They want us to become like them, cruel, vindictive, closed. We win by staying open." They held a press conference in the original garage, Sarah playing at their feet, while they addressed the world. "They're attacking us because we're winning," Valerie said simply. "Every smear, every threat, every lawsuit is proof that worker democracy terrifies them. Good. It should." "We're not going anywhere," Ethan added. "We're not backing down. We're going to keep building garages, keep training workers, keep proving that there's a better way. And if they want to stop us, they'll have to do it in front of the whole world." The assassination attempt came 3 days later. Ethan was teaching a welding class. He still insisted on teaching despite everything when the student next to him pulled a knife. Only instinct saved him, the same instinct that had saved Valerie in that alley years ago. He deflected the blade with a welding torch, the attacker screaming as the flame caught his arm. Tommy's security was there in seconds, but the damage was done. The attacker was just a kid, maybe 19, radicalized online by propaganda against the Foundation. He sobbed as they arrested him, saying he'd been told Ethan was destroying America. "Let him go," Ethan said, shocking everyone. "He tried to kill you," Tommy protested. "He's a victim too. Victim of lies, manipulation, desperation." Ethan looked at the kid. "You want to hurt me? Fine. But first learn what we actually do. Spend a month in our programs. Then decide if I'm your enemy." The kid Marcus Thompson took the offer. Within a week, he was crying in Ethan's office, apologizing. Within a month, he was one of their strongest advocates, telling his story of radicalization and redemption. "You could have had me arrested," Marcus said. "Could have destroyed my life." "Your life was already being destroyed," Ethan replied, "by people who convinced you that other workers were your enemy instead of the systems exploiting you. We don't destroy lives here. We rebuild them." That story, more than any policy or program, captured the world's imagination. The mechanic who forgave his would-be assassin, who turned an enemy into an ally through compassion instead of force. Applications to the garages exploded. Donations poured in from unexpected sources. Tech billionaires who'd realized their wealth meant nothing if society collapsed, celebrities who wanted to be part of something meaningful, even former opponents who'd seen which way the wind was blowing. 5 years after the alley, they held a global summit. Representatives from every garage, every country gathered in Detroit. The city that had been left for dead had become the capital of global economic transformation. Sarah, now old enough to understand some of what her parents did, gave the opening address. "My mommy and daddy fix broken things," she said into the microphone, her 5-year-old voice carrying across the packed stadium. "They fixed each other, then they fixed Detroit, and now they're fixing the world. When I grow up, I want to fix things too." The crowd erupted. Ethan and Valerie stood backstage, tears streaming down their faces. "We did this," Valerie whispered. "We actually did this." "No," Ethan corrected. "We started this. Everyone out there, they did this." The summit produced the Detroit Accords, a global agreement on worker rights that even reluctant governments couldn't ignore. Minimum profit-sharing standards. Elected worker representatives on all corporate boards. Protection for organizers. It wasn't everything they wanted, but it was more than they'd dreamed possible that night in the alley. But the biggest surprise came after the summit. Jiang Wei approached them privately with news that would change everything. "The Chinese Communist Party wants to officially adopt the Detroit Principle," he said. "Full worker democracy in all state enterprises. They're calling it socialism with Detroit characteristics." "That's billions of workers," Valerie breathed. "The largest expansion of democracy in human history," Zhang confirmed. "But they have conditions. They want you both to advise the transition. 6 months in Beijing." Ethan and Valerie looked at each other, communicating without words as they'd learned to do. It was dangerous. Sarah would have to come. They'd be vulnerable in a foreign country, but the opportunity— "We'll do it," they said in unison. The 6 months in Beijing were transformative. They watched as the world's largest workforce embraced democracy with an enthusiasm that surprised even optimists. Factory workers who'd never had a voice suddenly found themselves voting on production decisions. Innovation exploded as workers finally felt ownership of their labor. Sarah attended international school, becoming fluent in Mandarin and making friends from 50 countries. She was growing up as a citizen of the world, comfortable anywhere, afraid of nothing. But the real change was back home. With China embracing the Detroit Principle, American corporations had no choice but to follow suit or be left behind. The tax incentives helped, but competition sealed it. Companies that shared profits attracted better workers, produced better products, dominated markets. Capitalism is evolving, Jennifer observed at a board meeting after their return. We're watching economic natural selection in real time. Darwin would be proud, Father O'Brien joked. Survival of the fairest instead of the fittest. 10 years after the alley, they held Sarah's birthday party in the original garage, now a museum and pilgrimage site. The walls were covered with photos of millions of workers whose lives had been transformed thousands of garages around the world, the quiet revolution that had become a global transformation. "Make a wish, sweetheart," Valerie said as Sarah prepared to blow out her candles. "I wish Daddy would tell the story again," Sarah said. "The real one about the alley." So Ethan told it as he told it 100 times before, how he'd been ready to give up, how Valerie had literally fallen into his life, how they'd fought impossible odds and won by refusing to fight alone. "But here's the part I don't usually tell you," he said, looking at his daughter, his wife, their extended family of revolutionaries. "I wasn't the hero that night. I was just a mechanic with a wrench and nothing left to lose. Your mother wasn't a damsel in distress. She was a warrior who needed backup. We saved each other, and that's what made us strong enough to save everyone else." "Is that why you called it Cross and Hartley?" Sarah asked. "Because you needed each other." "That's exactly why," Valerie said. "Because every broken thing needs two forces to be fixed: pressure and support, breaking and building, courage and compassion. Your father brought one, I brought the other, and together we made something new." As the party continued around them, Ethan and Valerie stepped outside, standing in the same alley where it had all began. It had been cleaned up, decorated with murals depicting their story, but it was still recognizable. "Any regrets?" Valerie asked. "Just one," Ethan said. "I wish we'd met sooner. Imagine what we could have built with more time. We have time now. Sarah will have even more. And her children." Valerie trailed off, looking at the stars barely visible through Detroit's light pollution. "We didn't just fix the present, Ethan. We fixed the future. My dad would say a job's not done until you've cleaned up your tools. Then it's good we're not done." She took his hand. Calloused meeting calloused, now she'd learned to work with her hands as he'd learned to work with spreadsheets. "Tomorrow, we break ground on the Lagos garage. Next month, the Antarctic Research Station wants to implement our model. There's still so much to fix." "Together?" he asked, though he knew the answer. "Always together." They walked back into the party where Sarah was organizing the other children into what she called a kids' union to negotiate for later bedtimes. Diana was laughing. Tommy was pretending to be management. Morrison was teaching them about collective bargaining. "She's going to be worse than us," Ethan observed. "Better than us," Valerie corrected. "She's starting with advantages we never had. She knows change is possible because she's seen it happen." As the evening wound down and they prepared to leave, Ethan took one last look around the garage. His grandfather's tools still hung on the wall museum pieces now. The spot where his father had died was marked with a plaque. The door Valerie had stumbled through that night had been preserved bloodstains, and all with a sign that simply read, "Where Hope Walked In." "Ready to go home?" Valerie asked. But Ethan understood now that home wasn't a place. It was the life they had built, the family they'd created, the world they'd changed. Home was wherever they faced tomorrow together. "I'm already there," he said, lifting Sarah onto his shoulders as they walked out into the Detroit night toward whatever needed fixing next. The city lights sparkled around them, each one representing lives, changed futures, reclaimed proof that sometimes all it takes to change the world is one person willing to help another in their darkest moment. The revolution hadn't ended. Revolutions never really do. But it had evolved from desperate violence in an alley to deliberate democracy in boardrooms around the world. And at the center of it all, a mechanic and a billionaire who'd learned that the only thing more powerful than money or politics was two people who refused to give up on each other or the world they were determined to fix. Behind them, the garage stood proud against the night sky, its sign illuminated for all to see, Cross and Hartley Reclamation Center, where everything broken learns to work again. It wasn't just a motto anymore. It was a promise. and they intended to keep it one life, one worker, one impossible dream at a time.